All right, we are live. Hey guys, here we are. Thanks for coming. Sorry, I had to delay just the stream a couple days, but I hope that it could be worth it now. Sorry, I was trying to get my camera to focus, and it looks like okay. Back to normal now. What's going on? Um, yeah. So today I wanted to do a community call-in stream. This is an idea I've had for a while now of having people come on and talk to me because am really into the communication aspect of this, and I don't know. I wanted to be able to talk to you guys one on one, maybe put some faces to names, I guess, and have a bit of a dialogue between us. So I'm happy to have you guys here. We already got 9 people. That's pretty good for for how recently. Okay. Uh, extra said, how do we call in? That is a good question. So, I'm gonna send you guys. I'm gonna put a link in the chat to StreamYard. So what you can do is you can join through there, and you're basically going to be put into this little waiting room here that I have control over. I'm going to do my best to add people by the order from which they joined the room. I'm not sure exactly how long to keep people on for. I don't know how many people we're going to have that want to come on, so I'm pretty willing to have like extended conversations with people, I think. I'm doing pretty good, Anthony City. How are you doing? I had a pretty good week. There's a new Tyler the Creator album, and I absolutely love Tyler. So I've been bumping Chromacopia like crazy. I just got concert tickets today for him, so that's pretty cool. I've been pretty stressed out with the election. I think I've been consuming like way too much political content, and it's been pretty bad for me, I think. But I'm trying to feel a little bit better. I just kind of want this to be over. Hey Carson, thanks for joining, man. Hey Sheev, hey Wilfac, nice to have you guys here. Class got heated today. Yeah, I'm sure it did. I remember being a sophomore in high school during the 2016 election, and that was quite something. But we already got a decent amount of people in here, so I think that we can probably start having the call-ins. So if any of you guys would like to join, I'm about to put a link in the chat, and whoever joins first, I'll bring you on and we can have a bit of a conversation about whatever you guys want. Let's see how it goes. Okay, let's see how long it takes someone to join. In the meantime, I guess I could start talking a little bit about the election. These streams have kind of become my like unofficial way to talk about the election without having to make a video about it. Things are looking really close, like really close, and it's been extremely stressful, man. I I feel like I was a little too young in 2016 to like be that educated on it, but the result was certainly surprising. In 2020, I really had a feeling Biden was going to win. I really thought so. So that wasn't really a surprise. This is like the most unsure that I've ever been about an election, and it's probably going to end up being one of the closest elections in American history. So I guess that's unsurprising. extra has to download Chrome. Yeah, that's so annoying. I personally use Safari. We got Alejandro Garcia saying afternoon. Good afternoon to you too, sir. We got someone here in the chat. We got Fire. Okay, I think I'll add you to the stage then. You by no means have to turn your camera on, but you always can if you would like to. So here we go.
Well, nice to meet you, Andre. I've been watching the channel.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. You cut out right there. Oh, I'm so sorry. I heard like the first couple words you said. Alejandro, I'm not sure if there's a phone version, but I don't think there's an app. You might be able to join from a browser though. The Fire went out. Okay, I think Fire joined from another link. Let me try that out.
All right.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Well, nice to meet you, Andre.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
Yeah, I've watched your videos for quite a while now.
Nice, nice. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, do you mind if I ask a question?
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Well, I know it's like a bit early to think about this, but what do you see happening in the 2028 election if either candidate wins?
Ooh, okay. Um, man, okay. I think the path for Republicans is a lot more clear, if you ask me. Like, I think if Kamala Harris wins, we probably get something like a JD Vance in 2028, or maybe not necessarily Vance because he has his own sort of baggage, but I do think we would have a Trump anointed candidate running against Harris in 2028 if she were running for re-election. I don't really think you would see it like a Glenn Youngkin type or anything, because I think Trump would still have a lot of influence over the primary process, and I don't think someone like a Youngkin's going to get through that. And as far as if Trump won, I really have no idea what Democrats do. I think they would probably have to fall back on either like Whitmer, Shapiro, or Newsom, like any of those three governors, I think. But I don't know how they would have to code themselves or make themselves different from what Harris did in 2024 in order to come back. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a very interesting answer, and to be honest, I kind of like foresaw the same thing. Like I like as soon as Trump picked Vance and I saw all the MAGA like people falling over Vance and like holding and thinking of him as like a great like vice president, like he's an amazing man. Like I knew that he's gonna run in 2028. If Trump wins or if Trump loses, I feel like Vance is gonna run either way because of two-term limit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when it's funny because I feel like Trump picked Vance in the only window of time where he would have, right? Like he had just had the assassination attempt, so he was feeling really confident, and he was like at his high point as far as this election goes. He was like, "Yeah, I might as well pick a vice president that's going to help me govern and that might be a good successor to me." And then Biden drops out immediately after, which like no one could have seen that coming, you know.
Yeah, I mean Vance is definitely like way to the right of the Republican Party. Like even for Trump, like he is very right wing.
I actually, I don't know if you guys listen to Ezra Klein, but I listened to a really interesting episode he did with Vivek Ramaswamy today, and it was basically Vivek sort of establishing himself in opposition to Vance a little bit, sort of sticking to more like a libertarian capitalism over or a libertarian sort of republicanism over the like populist right angle that JD comes at it from. And I thought that was interesting because I didn't realize there was that much of a divide between those two factions.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Trump's going to really be realistically. I don't know if he's going to be alive in 4 years. He's not the healthiest man. And after he passes, which is a real possibility in the next 4 years, 8 years, I'll be really interested to see what happens, really.
Oh, I don't know, man. Trump, I know Trump's not the healthiest man, but I just feel like he's gonna be around forever. You know, like that guy's like a force of nature. Watch him end up like outliving Carter somehow.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, he is younger than Carr, so like he's definitely gonna outlive Carr because I don't think Carr's gonna last another year.
Sorry, I meant watch him live longer than Carter.
Oh yeah, I feel like he definitely will.
Okay. Yeah, like, I mean,
like I don't think he's gonna drop dead like any second. I just think that like maybe in like 8 to 10 years he's not gonna be doing so great because he's gonna be in his late 80s and he's in McDonald's and Diet Coke and Coca-Cola his whole life. Like that can't be good for you.
Yeah, I don't know. Trump. Why does Trump just code as like more vigorous than he is, right? Like he's still an old man and he still has all of those trappings, but just like I guess because he's so funny, like he's so strange and lively in a way that you end up kind of forgetting that he's almost 80.
Yeah, like he definitely like he's definitely looking the part. Like he's definitely looked a lot older in the last few years. But yeah, he does still. Like, I mean, even though his like speeches are like speeches sometimes just devolve into like complete rambling nonsense. So do you think he is loses marbles a little bit and he's shown his age a little more? But if you go back like 8 years, he didn't really show his age like as much as he does now. Like he still looked like a bit young 8 years ago, but now he just doesn't.
I mean, if he's 78 now, he would have been 72 8 years ago. Or no, he would have been 70. Oh, yeah. I think he was 69 when he was running in 16. Yeah, that makes sense. 69 to 78 is a huge difference, though.
Oh yeah.
Like those years are. Oof. I don't know. We got 2 more people waiting in the queue, so I'm not exactly sure how long these calls should last for. So I'm gonna move on to the next person. But you feel welcome to try to join in later in case the conversations end up being quicker. But thank you so much for joining, and I appreciate the kind words, and thank you for your questions.
Oh, no problem. I'll be glad to watch the rest of the calls, and see you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, now we got extra.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So my first question was, what's your favorite song off the new Tyler record?
Oh, I wasn't expecting a question about the Tyler record. Man, I love Darling I, and I love Balloon. I absolutely love those 2 songs.
I love the feature on Balloon.
Dochi's great.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, and then have you voted? And are you dooming or are you really hopeful?
I haven't voted because I'm actually not an American citizen, so I can't vote.
Wait, whoops.
No, that's okay.
but you live in America, right?
Yeah. I live in Florida.
Okay. Facts.
Yeah, sorry. No, I'm originally Brazilian, and No, it's okay. I haven't quite become a citizen yet, but trying my best. As far as am I dooming, man, I've gone kind of back and forth. I think people would be lying if they said they haven't gone back and forth this election.
Yeah.
Me as a person overall, I feel like I try to be a lot more hopeful. I'm really, really just like against doomerism, but it is really hard not to be hopeless sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you're familiar with these videos, or even if you're familiar with my channel, like you probably know I'm on the left side of the political spectrum. You know, like that I'm cheering for the Democrats to win. I think that like I'm further left than Kamala Harris is, but I'm all about practical politics. I think that you should always vote in your best interest. I've seen a lot of people talking lately about vote as if you're choosing who your opposition is. And I think that that's really smart. Like if you're a big lefty person, you'd probably rather be dealing with Kamala Harris than Donald Trump, right?
Right. Okay. So I was really dooming, and then the rally at Madison Square Garden. I thought that was kind of a vibe shift, especially with the comments that, I mean, obviously it's like nothing new. We've already heard like so many insane things come out of people who endorse Trump and like everything out of that campaign. But I felt like there was a massive vibe shift after there was like Puerto Rican like the comments on it, and then also being reminded of how many like Puerto Rican voters there are in places like Pennsylvania where it's like must win. And maybe that's just like too optimistic, but I thought that was crazy, just like how many Puerto Ricans there are in Pennsylvania, and just to have something as careless as that like potentially like blow up the campaign. And it's not even Donald Trump blowing up the campaign, and I don't think it's blown up, but God, it's just
as far as the Madison Square Garden rally, I think I've seen a couple people going back and forth on that. Like, first of all, people just saying like, oh, why sing in New York? And then people are like, oh, congressional races are a big deal. And also like where you do a rally might not matter as much, as because rallies get national attention and we're just kind of running a national campaign. But also it's like you might as well try to target it places, right? Like there's plenty of places you could have done huge rallies, even if they're not exactly Madison Square Garden. As far as the Puerto Rican comments go, I feel like I really don't think someone who was going to vote Trump would see that comment and be like, okay, I'm gonna switch my vote now. But I do think it could be a turnout thing. I do think it could turn out a lot of people that maybe weren't going to vote. And I think that that's the best hope there. I think the Madison Square Garden rally does kind of serve as like a reminder of how crazy some of the Trump rhetoric can get. You know, like the Haitians eating the dog comments have kind of left the news by now, so it was a little refresher.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting. Have you heard of like the idea of like reverse 2016? How like the Trump campaign is like basically running like Hillary's campaign in 2016, like, you know, not going to Wisconsin. I mean, I'm sure he has gone to Wisconsin, but
I saw that a little more earlier in the campaign.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that as much lately. Like there's been the change in the Harris. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was agreeing with you about like whenever like Harris took over, how it's less so.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, I think I don't know what the Harris team's been doing like the last month. It's really weird. I feel like I saw oh my god, I saw JJ talk about it, and I love keeping up with what JJ McCullough says, because he's like a very unique type of voter. I think he's exactly the type of voter that Kamala is kind of like targeting with that Liz Cheney stuff, right? Not to say that there's like that many people like that, but I saw him I don't know if it was a live stream of his or something, but he was talking about like, oh, Kamala started talking about unions, and it reminded me, I don't like this. I don't like her policies. I just like her because she's not Trump, and because I think Trump is uniquely bad.
Right.
And I was like, man, that's the kind of voter that they're going for, you know. And and I don't know necessarily if like I feel at least I know with JJ personally, he was already in the Kamala camp first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he was there before. He didn't necessarily need to be convinced. So I don't know if I guess it's a bet of turnout versus
right.
Versus convincing people. But even then, it's like, how do you do it without alienating people? But we also do have a lot of the Biden campaign team still working on Kamala, and they weren't exactly doing a great job. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, at this point in time, there's just way more like centrists who are, you know, in those swing states, and who are those deciding votes over people who would consider themselves to be like, you know, more like leftist types. And so I think, you know, and I also think that the Harris campaign is just way too scared to, and rightfully so, to, you know, even pretend that, you know, she's a progressive, even if at one point in time she was. I don't think she ever was really, but I think she's playing to the right, regardless of how. I don't think it's necessarily an indication of how she'll govern. I think she just and her team, they really know that they really have to get those, you know, people in Pennsylvania, people in Wisconsin, who, you know, centrists.
Yeah, I mean, the reality about how we view politicians is that for most people, Kamala Harris is just going to code as inherently more progressive because she's a black woman, you know. And that's actually a kind of a gift that Joe Biden had, because he was this like old white guy who was known for being very moderate and who had been in Washington forever. He was able to get far more progressive legislation passed than like Barack Obama, who ran on hope and change, you know. So as far as Kamala herself, I'm not really sure she's that ideological, or at least we don't know where exactly her like firm ideological commitments are. You know, like you were talking about it, how she ran like super progressive in 2020 because that's what everybody thought you were supposed to do, and now she's coding a lot more to the center or to the right because I don't know, Joe Biden's so unpopular, and she can't really run on that. She can't. Oh, my cat's here. Okay. She can't really run so much on those accomplishments as she could, just because of how unpopular he is. So she can't run as an incumbent. She has to run as a change candidate despite being the party in power. So it's a weird position to be in. And she also doesn't have the sort of like vetting and training that people get from running for president for like 2 years before the general election, you know? So I don't think she would have run I don't think she would have won a primary, but like hypothetically, if she had been through that process, I think she would be a better candidate in the general. So I do think part of it also is just that she started her campaign so late.
Right. Yeah, okay. Hold
Yeah.
on, sorry, I'm thinking. Yeah,
No,
so
it's okay. One more question, and then we'll probably
yeah,
move on to the next person.
cool. Oh gosh, I don't even think I have a next question, so you can just
Oh, okay. No, but thank
yeah,
you for joining. I
yeah. Thank
appreciate
you
you
so
taking the
much.
time to hop on, and feel free to stay on. And if we run out of people, we might
Okay.
get back to you.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks. See ya. Okay. We got by Coat Zero. You're next up. Better be ready.
Hey, yeah. So
Hey.
yeah, it's Bijou. It's French.
Oh, Bijou.
It's a really rare last name.
Oh, okay. Nice,
Yeah.
nice.
I just want to start. I love your videos. These kind of really human, like psych profiles of these like giants. I love it so much. Like
Oh.
the Nixon video. What Nixon thought of other presidents. That sent me into a spiral. You know those Frank Gannon interviews?
Oh, I don't actually. Oh, wait.
Yeah, you
Are-
use them in your video. His like
Okay.
video memoirs, you know.
Hmm.
You can find them all online. It just sent me that video sent me into like a spiral for like a month where I was just watching those.
No, thank
Yeah.
you. I really appreciate that. That video really came from like I had seen clips of Nixon talking just for looking for videos of other presidents, and then that clip of Nixon talking about the Kennedy brothers and him talking about TR. I had used those two clips in like 3 or 4 videos before that, just because they're
Yeah.
so powerful and they're so relevant, and I feel like oh my god, I'm trying to remember. This is a weird analogy, but do you know are you familiar with like Kanye West music at all?
Ish a little bit.
On the song Big Brother off of Graduation, Kanye is talking about like Jay-Z and his relationship with him, and he's
Mhm.
like an idol in my eyes, god of the game, heart of the city, Rockefeller chain, never
Yeah.
be the same, never be another. Like he's
Yeah.
just using all these grandiose terms to describe Jay-Z, and in doing that, I feel like he makes Jay-Z sound bigger than Jay-Z ever could have himself.
Yeah.
You know, and I sort of see those Nixon interviews where he's talking about Kennedy, where he's talking about Johnson in a similar light. I don't know, you just hear it, and Nixon's so articulate, and he's got the voice, and he's got the whole
Right,
thing.
yeah.
And some people point out to me like, oh, he might not be truthful like as a politician. He's just saying like what he wants to be perceived publicly, and I think that like that's true, but doesn't make it any less interesting.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. Nixon lived at such a period where he you got to think the first president he voted for, first election he voted in would have been what, like Truman or Roosevelt.
Yeah, something like that.
To go from that to dying during the Clinton presidency, that's an insane span of history.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. His childhood was really interesting. You know, his mother was very psychologically, like maybe she was a little manipulative, and the father, he always denied it, but he clearly was. There's a lot of testimony to it that he was violent, and I believe what 2 of the sons died, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when one of them died, Nixon was very affected because his father had said that the best of the flock had died. And I always thought, wow, you can tell that must have really stuck with him, you know, and I always imagine that as having driven a lot of his youth, you know.
Yeah. Have
Yeah.
you man, I've thought of making a video just about Nixon's youth, like becoming
yeah.
Richard Nixon or something like that. What you're saying right there, like really reinforces that desire in me. I don't know if you've ever seen during Nixon's farewell address, not to the public, but to his White House staff.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh my dude, that speech is heart wrenching, and when
Yeah.
he's like on the verge of tears, he's like, "No one will ever write a book about my mother, but my mother, she was a saint. She was a saint, I tell you." And it's just, oh, like you hear that, and I feel like you could see the entire picture of his childhood that you're talking about painted right there. Just
right.
Nixon's just such an interesting guy, man. Like such a
Hold on,
weird
give me just
character.
1 second.
Oh, no worries, man.
I'm sorry. I just had someone try to call me. But your audio cut
Oh
out for a
no,
second. Can you repeat that?
no, you're good. I was saying, what was I saying? Oh, just I feel like that's moment where he's talking about his mother. It just kind of
Yeah.
paints this whole picture of his childhood that you're talking about there. And I feel like Nixon was just this very like strange, neurotic guy, but also very interesting, just like clearly brilliant, and this Shakespearean character that's larger than life. And it's I think it's honestly like a treasure to be able to have as much video of him as we do.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and he loved it. I mean, there's so countless hours long interviews, even just ones where he would talk about foreign relations with Russia. You know, he'd sit down to do these hour-long interviews on very specific topics. Um, yeah, he was so interesting. You know, he would wear suits around the house because he was so insecure. I always thought that detail was and you're talking about his farewell address, him talking about his mother. He said that she was a saint, and it was a shame that no books would ever be written about her. Yeah,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Sorry. Go ahead.
Do you have any more of these like profiles lined up? Like who would you want to
Ooh,
explore next?
man, I read this great book that I always plug here on the channel called oh my god, it's called Coming of Age, JFK, Coming of Age in the American Century by Frederick Logevall.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's about it's I'm sure you're familiar with it based off what you're saying, but I'll explain it just in case anyone in the audience doesn't. It's this book that basically explores the first half of JFK's life, I think up until he's running for Senate. And he's this very like Forrest Gump type figure. Like he's this young man who's interested in politics, who's like one of the last Americans to visit Nazi Germany before World War II starts. His dad's the ambassador to Britain, so he's like all over the world and he's meeting all these like crazy characters. And it's a great book to read if you're a young person interested in politics.
Yeah.
And I read, that's one of the best books that I've ever read. And I took extensive notes on it when I read it about a year ago, and I was supposed to make a video, but it was just I just had so many notes, man. And I ended up making I have a video about his affair with Inga Arvad, that was the accused Nazi spy.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'll just do a video about this and then I'll make the bigger video later. And I ended up never making the bigger video. That was supposed to be up next, but I hate to say I'm a little unorganized.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty indecisive, and sometimes like I'll start working on a video and think that it's the next one, and then something else catches my attention. So I don't always know what the next video is gonna be. So I wish I had a better answer. But that JFK one's definitely coming at some point.
That'd be great. Now, you're a big fan of the Caro books, The Years of Lyndon Johnson. Where are you in those books?
Oh, I finished those books, actually.
Did you? Oh, that's great.
I was last year I was a delivery driver for a couple months, and I actually was not a big book person. I just had a hard time like sitting down and reading books. So I was driving for extended periods of time, and I needed something to listen to that I could just play forever and not have to keep like switching YouTube videos and stuff like that. So I was like, I'll try audiobooks. So I got through the Years of Lyndon Johnson. I didn't listen to them all like sequentially. I did other books in between, but I think from like February to like July probably of last year.
Yeah, your videos got me into those books. I have one on my nightstand right now.
Where are you in the series?
I do skip around. You see, I've never actually finished one of the books, but I'm skipping through Path to Power. Yeah, that's the second one, right?
Path to Power is the first one.
The first one. Well, what's the one with the white cover? What's the one I'm thinking of?
Are you talking about the Means of Ascent? That's the second one. Means of Ascent.
That's what I'm thinking of. Getting caught up in school right now, so haven't had a whole lot of time.
Yeah. No, you're good. Those books are incredible.
Yeah.
Someone's got to make like a HBO series about those.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get around to it someday if I'm lucky enough. But
Nixon described those books as awful.
yeah, well, it's that's such a funny interview because I've had clips of those in my videos, clips of that interview in my videos before too, because he's like, those books are awful. They make him seem like an animal because he was.
Right.
It's like, why are they awful if you're saying it's accurate?
Yeah.
Maybe he just wasn't a fan of like the psychoanalysis and the sort of evaluation of power and a cynical politician because it might have hit a little too close to home.
Yeah, right. Yeah. One I'd recommend, I just started. It's called Oblivion. It's called The Unquiet Oblivion of Richard Nixon, something like that.
Oh, okay, that sounds cool.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it covers just about the first few years after his presidency, and you hear about the first couple days after the presidency, especially, and him saying goodbye to people on Air Force One, and these promotions that he promised them that he never got around to, that he's apologizing for, and these trinkets he's trying to give people in remembrance. He's like searching around in drawers for watches to give people, Oh, it's heartbreaking, yeah.
No, that sounds like an awesome book. Do you know if there's an audiobook of it by any chance? Because I'm actually looking for a book right now.
It's not terribly popular.
Oh, okay.
I got it at a used bookstore recently. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll be on the lookout for it. And if there's if there's an audiobook for it, I might just start it during work tomorrow.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming. I'll probably move on to the next person now. But I appreciate the questions. Thank you so much for coming on. Feel free to. No, of course. Feel free to stay on, and maybe we could get back to you later on.
All right, gotcha. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, man. See you later. All right, next up, we got Nathan, I believe. Okay. Hey,
Andre.
Hey, how you doing, man? Nice to meet you. I'm good.
Yeah, I've been watching your videos for a few months now. I really enjoyed it. As you can see, I got JFK here behind me.
I see that.
Yeah, I study history and I love all your videos. I think it really helps me get into more depth about some of the presidents' biographies that I haven't dug into too deeply. So it's been great to watch your videos.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I have a few questions for you. I'm really interested to hear your opinion on it. The first one is focused. And I think you've talked about this before in the streams, but I think one of the biggest issues right now, and I think for the long term in American politics, is the influence of large corporations on the politics, the elections, the lobbying in Congress. What do you see as the most likely path, or any possible paths, to return to a pre-Citizens United system, or one that has more public funding rather than private funding? I don't know. Do you have any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's helpful to look at similar periods in time, right? I think if you look at where we're at now, it's probably a little comparable to the Gilded Age, right? And what was that followed by? The Progressive era. There was this party realignment where you'd get progressivism on both sides, whether that be a Woodrow Wilson or a Theodore Roosevelt. I think if you look at right now, it does seem like we're in some sort of realignment, right? You got someone like J.D. Vance, who, regardless of what you think of him, he is a different kind of Republican, at least rhetorically speaking, even if he doesn't show up for votes on the Senate floor. But you could see sort of changing wind there. The neoliberal order that was sort of established after Reagan seems like it is at least fading away. Not that we necessarily know what comes after that, but the Biden presidency of 2020 was extremely different from if Biden had been elected in 2008 or Biden had been elected in 1980. And I think Biden's such a useful person to look at because Biden's like a politician. Like he really follows where the popular mood is, you know? So if you look at Mr. Generic Democrat himself and how like much better on corporate issues he was than Barack Obama, how much better, like how much more progressive he was than Democrats, like the last couple of Democrats that preceded him, I think you could see that we're probably going in a pretty good direction. And you got Republicans complaining about corporations too, even if it's about the wokeism. You know, if that's if that's what they got to do to regulate Disney a little bit more in Florida sometimes. Like I'm from Florida, and I think Disney could be a little better regulated. You know, yeah. I think that it's hard to predict what's coming up, but I definitely think that there's a change happening, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I largely agree with you. You know, I look at it the same way. I think that there's this potential for the Democratic Party to continue on a path that I think, you know, there's a seed planted with the Bernie Sanders 2016. You know, even like Occupy Wall Street, you know, and Obama in some rhetorical instances. Yeah. You know, you saw this push to some economic populism, you know, an us versus the big corporations, and it progressed through 2016. You know, and I think 2020, the primaries, we saw that, you know, it took a lot of the candidates in the Democratic primaries. They really took up this economic, you know, progressivism. And I think that Biden's, you know, I think that his administration has been surprisingly, you know, labor positive, and I think that, you know, Kamala in her campaigning has been including some you know, I think concessions to the left, you know, even if it's like hidden in like a kind of, I think it appeals to just this broader population of just like people who are struggling economically. I think that's very important, you know, to kind of turn the message back on Trump. You know, that Trump, you know, the Republicans have tried to capture this message that oh, we'll make the economy better, we'll make your you know, we'll return to a great America. You know, and it's all rhetoric because he just, you know, gives the corporations, you know, lower taxes. So I think there's a real possibility for you know, a great realignment to happen with a you know, a strong Democratic candidate pushing for like radical change against, you know, the influence of money in politics. I think it's a tough push because you got to work with the congressional members that I think are influenced by it right now. But yeah, I think that there's a real path forward with that, and I think that could be, you know, a next, you know, firm realignment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I wish that the American public overall cared as much about like specific policy and like economic issues on paper as much as we did, but that's just like not the reality, unfortunately. And if you look at someone like Bernie Sanders, like why he was so successful in 2016 and why so successful in 2020, I think you could see like Bernie went on Rogan, right? And he fit right in. And they had a good conversation, and the Rogan guys were like, "Oh my God, he's not crazy. Like he's actually making a lot of good points."
Yeah.
And I think, like, if you look, like there were like a bit of Bernie Trump voters, and why? Because it's not too policy heavy, right? It's vibes, and it's the way that they speak. And Bernie's talking about the establishment, and Bernie's talking about the billionaires and the zillionaires and the whatever, you know. Like you're not gonna get Kamala Harris talking about the establishment. Like you're not gonna get those things. But I actually there's a friend of mine who's in the queue here. I see him. That I was saying this to him the other day, that as much as we complain about neoliberalism, right? Like Ronald Reagan won 49 states in 1984. Yeah. Like Democrats did not win a presidential election for 12 years. And like Bill Clinton going to the center and neoliberalism is kind of what saved the Democratic Party, right? Like I wish that wasn't the case, right? But like since then, like if you look at it, since 1992 with Bill Clinton, Republicans won the popular vote once. Like the neoliberal Democratic order, like on the, you know, it's been fairly popular. Like just now are we seeing like those cracks that we talked about. And of course there was stuff like Occupy Wall Street, and there was Trump's election in 2016 that sort of pointed to a different direction, but we can't act like this political project wasn't like popular and successful. So it's just a matter of sort of figuring out how you do transition to a sort of more like Bernie Sanders politics, whether that be through like the way that a politician codes compared to like their actual policies itself and everything, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think I'm in alignment with you on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the last stream, and I left a couple comments that you responded to, and I appreciated them. The one was about William Jennings Bryan, and the other one was about the Laos, the secret war, in Laos. I sent you I sent a documentary about it to you, and the William Jennings Bryan has been someone that I've been like really interested in when it comes to politics. I one day I decided to go to my college library. I go to the University of Wisconsin, and I just looked for William Jennings Bryan biographies, and I found one that had very like good nuanced views on what Jennings Bryan's life and political ideology process was. And I think there are a couple quotes in here from figures that I think I'd like to share, and I want to see what you think about them.
Okay.
So the first one's from Eugene Debs. So this was the start of the book. The author quoted Eugene Debs. He says, quote, "In the early years of Mr. Bryan's career, his views, political or otherwise, were centered around progressivism. But since his first campaign, he grew more and more conservative until he finally stood before this century, a champion of everything reactionary in our political and social life. To speak with perfect frankness, the cause of human progress sustains no loss in the death of Mr. Bryan." And the second one is from Truman, and he said, quote, "He was just too far ahead of his time, and the people in the East, the big money people, were against him, and they did everything they could do to defeat him. Old Bryan kept liberalism alive, kept it going." So it's like I feel like the views on Bryan are so diverse, because you see there, Debs viewing him as a great progressive, and Debs is like a radical, was probably in alignment with Bryan at the beginning, but saw him shift into conservatism. While Truman, as a liberal behemoth, looked at Bryan as someone who was like the epitome of what seems to be like good governance, good politics. Like he seemed to love Bryan, like Truman. I didn't know before reading this, but it seems like Truman idolized Bryan, and I wonder if you knew what Truman thought of him. I don't know. I feel like Bryan, as I mentioned before, is so influential in the politics and the views that a lot of the important figures had, like for Debs and Bryan and Truman, but it just is not recognized at all. It's
I will say, like I said to you in the previous stream, I don't know like that much about William Jennings Bryan, but I appreciate you teaching me a little bit about him, and I like love how excited you're getting. Like I could hear like how passionate you are about it there, and I just think that's awesome. I like seeing that. Oh, I didn't know that there was so much like varying opinions on him, and that actually makes him a lot more intriguing to me. I think like the most extensive I've read on Bryan was a portion of the Almost President's book that's dedicated to him, that really focused on him as this sort of like outsider, like this guy from the West who was this big like religious preacher, and how he sort of became this kind of demagogue, right? If I'm remembering correctly, and how he was like the like an original brand of populism, and I want to understand that history a little more, especially after hearing you talk about it a little bit. But also I think that in terms of like what Truman thought of him versus what Debs thought of him, I think people tend to project feelings onto politicians, right? Like if you look at I think Richard Nixon and did Richard Nixon like Truman? I'm doubting myself if I'm remembering
I'm not sure.
that correctly.
You'd probably know better than me on that.
I was gonna say that Jimmy Carter's favorite president was Harry Truman, and Richard Nixon might have also really liked Truman, but I'm not so sure about Richard Nixon now. I'm doubting it. So you can get a couple of different things from different people as far as how they feel about historical figures. I mean, look at JFK. Like, you got the tapestry.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
is there other than like Lincoln and Washington and any of the founding fathers, like a more universally sort of revered president among the American people, right? Like, they can kind of project whatever they want onto him.
Exactly. Yeah, but I feel like that's such a great example. Like the Lincoln for that is like people project all their opinions. Like anytime Republicans like, oh well, that's my party. That's still the same thing. And of course, people on the left project everything like liberatory and everything positive and anti-racist to Lincoln. I feel like the views today on Lincoln are pretty distorted. I still think he was a great president. But I think projection on presidents it varies so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you're talking about Lincoln, I feel like so much of it just kind of falls into like historical relativism, right? Like, you gotta think about how someone how someone would have been perceived in their own time. Like, were they exceptionally racist for the time they were around? Did they like fight explicitly to keep slavery around, to like uphold segregation, or were they just like a more passive figure? Did they have sort of like a kind of broad racism that I think we could all, unless someone was like really acting in bad faith, could like acknowledge that Abraham Lincoln had? Like I know people always talk about like, oh, great emancipator, but he only emancipated the ones in the free states, and it was only after his death that like all those little details. But if you look at like the political maneuvering that Abraham Lincoln had to do, like, oh my God, I don't know if you've ever read Team of Rivals by Doris Kears Goodwin. Is a great book. And it just goes into how Lincoln had to work with all these different people that ran against him and all the political compromises, and how he, like, it's probably like Lincoln had the presidency on like extra hard mode.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, the presidency takes compromise, and it takes having to make difficult decisions. So I don't think we can necessarily, like, of course we can't judge Lincoln by the time that we live in, but we also have to think about it in terms of what he could accomplish politically within his own time. Like, if we got a radical Republican in office instead of Lincoln, like, would they have been able to pull off what Lincoln did, or would it have just not been smart politics?
Yeah. I think that the biggest issue I have with Lincoln is just the Native American that stuff. That's the biggest issue. But I don't think a different president would have been much different. Like, it's that kind of thing. And I do think that Lincoln's death, his assassination, is one of the worst things that could have happened. Just because it's the Johnson presidency. I think that things could have been much different had he stayed alive. And yeah, I agree. Like, Lincoln, I think that he was a great president. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, I don't know. I wonder if we could ever have another president that's so universally revered like that, or if we're just a little past that. I think FDR is probably the closest that we come, but even then, FDR, there's a lot of FDR hate out there.
There's a lot of fiscal conservatives really don't like him. They really hate him. So he's got a lot of haters today.
Yeah, I used to have oh my God, I don't think I ever featured it in a video, but I used to have a printed out photo of this political cartoon of like FDR smoking the Constitution. It was supposed to be critical of him, but I just thought it was like the hardest picture I'd ever seen.
Yeah, like I fuck with FDR. It's so crazy that he ran 4 terms, and it's just like he's still viewed as like great. We all love him. He's just kept dominating.
And he was not there that fourth term. He was not alive, man.
He should have ran. It should have been Wallace. Should have been Wallace, but Truman was still a good president.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Nathan. I appreciate your excitement. I appreciate your knowledge, and I hope to talk to you again, man. Feel free to hang around.
It was great. I can't wait to watch the rest of the call-ins.
Thanks, man. See you later.
See you.
Okay. All right. Coming up, we got Sleeping Joe. All right. And better be ready. Here we go.
Hello.
Hi. Very, very enthusiastic. I like that.
Yes. When it comes to most things political, I typically am. First off, let me say I'm a big fan of your content. I think it is a very great thing to see a smallish, medium-sized YouTuber doing all of this political content, both in the Cold War era and contemporary. Very, very in depth. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and you should be proud.
Thank you so much.
Secondarily, I don't have a lot of time, but I would like to contribute a sort of a small token to this discussion.
Okay.
I am a volunteer for the Democratic Party. I am in a swing state, although, I don't want to say which one, but I'm in a swing state, and I have had a few experiences talking to voters, specifically swing voters, and seeing what their top concerns are. And I think it's been really interesting because, for me personally, just because I am a center left young man in like a very, very partisan time, in a very, very partisan environment. I had an interest in history first and then in politics. So I kind of went in with this ideal of like, oh, we're all Americans. We'll all like team up and solve our problems together.
Mm-hmm.
And then that hasn't necessarily been the case, I've found.
Mm-hmm.
But talking to voters, I've just seen on both sides, but in my experience, the right wing more. Just this horrible, horrible partisanship that is very, very extreme. And I wanted your opinion on what do you think it will take in order to sort of overcome this extreme partisan environment we live in? Do you think it's just a Trump thing, or do you think this is going to stick with us for a while?
Oh man, I wish I had a good answer for you, but honestly, I think that the person that comes up with a good answer for that is going to be the next person that could redefine our politics. I think this was a point I've made before in a couple videos. We're at a really divided time, like you're saying, and everyone always says like they want unity, but they don't want to there's not really an urge to compromise, right? Like you want unity, but along your own political ideals. I think that if you look at someone like an FDR, right, who was able to very successfully diagnose a problem, tell the American people like, hey, this is what's wrong. Like objectively, this is the problem that we are facing. This is the difficulty that we as a collective have to address. And I'm going to try to solve it, right? I'm going to try different things. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. And I'm going to see what works, but I'm trying, right? Like, I think if you could maybe have a politician that was able to sort of address a common issue for Americans, and like, I think COVID, like under a different president, I think COVID could have been extraordinary for as like a uniting moment for people. Like, hey, we're America, we have to come together. Like if you look at even like George W. Bush, like George W. Bush's approval rating soared after 2000. Like I was talking to my girlfriend's mom the other day, and she's a very like standard like Democrat person, like she's voted for every Democrat since like Walter Mondale, except for George Bush in 2004. She voted for Bush in 2004 because she wanted to show that the country was united against our adversaries overseas, right? So I think that perhaps it might take a great crisis to unite us against a common cause, but I don't know necessarily what it exactly looks like.
I think that I would really agree with that, because this is a particularly partisan time in the United States, but we've had really, really partisan times before. I'd say the default in our country is at least some form of partisanship, right? But the modern news media, throughout all of American history, most news media has been biased in some shape or form. In the Jefferson versus Adams election, newspapers would print out propaganda essentially, and that's been almost the standard throughout American history. But in today's environment specifically, particularly in contrast to the sort of last era of politics that happened during the Cold War, the media, there is a strong profit motive to be divisive and extreme and not necessarily informative. And I feel that in order for a true like national unity moment on the scale like we saw of FDR or Bush post 2001, or even the Reagan election in 1984, or any landslide election at this point, I think that we are going to need to see some way for popular media outlets to begin to act in a more nonpartisan manner or fashion.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of validity to what you're saying. Like, definitely, it benefits the news for us to be mad at each other, right? Like, I remember, I'm not sure if you remember back in before the Biden election, like the people that were like, "Oh, we want Biden to win so we can go back to brunch and we can stop paying attention to politics," right? Like, if we have like a boring old guy in office and things just go back to normal, then we don't have to watch CNN and NBC and Fox News and all these things, and we don't have to like tear each other's heads off. But I mean, if you look at 2016, like a big part of how Trump got attention was just earned media, right? Like the CNN would just air his entire rallies and just cover him nonstop. Like, I think Donald Trump really has this sort of attitude of like all press is good press, and whether or not
Yeah.
that's true, I guess we'll kind of find out less than a week from now, right? But in terms of like everything is political and everything is like politics has sort of become our culture. Like if I go on Instagram, I'm scrolling, I might see something about rap music, I might see a meme, and then I might see like dead kids in Gaza just like on
Yeah.
my feed, and that's like, first of all, that's just not healthy. Like, like that's something that you should definitely like pay attention to, something that should be addressed, but it maybe shouldn't be like lumped in there with like Tyler the Creator's new album. You know, like
Yeah.
that's just not great for us as a people, and like the profit motive's there, and you can like, I think what you've been hearing since 2016 is like, oh, new media, like corporate media is dying and no one watches CNN and new media is coming up, but like new media is also really partisan. Like you got like
Definitely.
you got like Destiny and Young Turks and Tim Pool and Ben Shapiro and all these people, and it just further kind of creates our own little realities, right? Like there's no monoculture anymore. There's no like Walter Cronkite, like same three news networks. We all have our own versions of the news. So it's even like, let's say like you're talking about like traditional media, even if that did become less partisan, like what happens with everyone's YouTube feed and everyone's Twitter feed and all these things? It's just so difficult to remove ourselves from that. I don't really know how we can.
That talk on new media, that was a really, really great point. Particularly with how partisanship drives engagement. That's just going to be something that we are going to have to reckon with. And going back to the idea of a national crisis, I think what we are going to need in order to find some unity and get back some semblance of a monoculture in this, like, really both entertainment wise and political wise, just fractured and divided sort of modern American society, it is going to be some big tremendous crisis that would probably have to be on a pretty existential scale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you a lot for your time. I have to run. Please, please, please keep up the fantastic content.
No, thank you for joining. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate all of your helpful commentary, man.
Awesome. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. All right. Here we go. Before we move on to the next person, I'm just going to turn my AC down really fast because it gets really hot here under these lights. But so far, I'm having a lot of fun. Sorry if I haven't been able to keep up with the comments as much. I was just trying my best to pay attention to everyone while they're talking. But I see you guys are... there's a lot of comments. I'm sorry if I haven't been able to get to them. But if I run out of people on stage, I will definitely go ahead and answer. But coming up on stage now, we have Thomas A. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Hello. I've been watching your channel for probably close to a year now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Have I been subscribed that long? Probably not. But I appreciate you bringing me on as part of the call-in. I'm just listening to what everybody's saying, and it's really interesting to see that a lot of people are thinking the same way, may have a different take on things, but a lot of people do see or sort of see the same way. With the social media aspect of things, there's a lot of vested interest in getting those clicks. The 24-hour news cycle, which has been going on since well before I was born, that has been dividing America. And I sort of more see it as more of a class thing than more of a political thing. I would say I'm actually a native Floridian, born and raised.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I grew up in the St. Pete area, and I live in Orlando now. But my family and my family friends, a lot of them are conservative in nature. So I grew up with a conservative mindset, and going into high school, becoming a better person, a whole lot better person, going from oh gosh, I was a completely different person. I ended up actually interning in my senior year of high school for my congressman at the time, which was actually Charlie Crist. And that just sort of opened up my eyes of perspective to everything. And it's the American public, everybody agrees in the conversations that I have on a daily basis. A lot of people hate the corporate greed. That right there is what I find is what is strangling us as Americans. Everybody, all these corporations, they keep increasing the prices for inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But all the subscription services, and Lisa Khan, she's been doing a phenomenal job as the FTC chair in going after these larger corporations. I sort of wanted to see, get your take on corporate greed. Obviously it has a lot of influence in our politics with lobbying and Citizens United and whatnot, and being deemed a person. But what is your take on that?
Okay. Number one, it's nice to be talking to another Floridian. I feel like people kind of make fun of us on the internet, so it's we got to band together. As far as corporate greed goes, geez, that's huge. Man, I think wow. Okay. So I think that we can sort of, like, when you ask everybody about corporate greed, I think that is one of those problems, like I was talking about in the last with the last person, that we sort of like could maybe unite around, right, in a big way. but I do think that it changes a lot once you talk to people. Like it's like Medicare for all. Like Medicare for all polls with like 70% approval rating or something. But then once you start asking people like, hey, your taxes would go up and it would be like this and this and that, and then suddenly like the support plummets. Right. So like once that's why like the sort of FDR theory of politics can be rather effective, because it's more about diagnosing a problem than necessarily finding a solution, because people can really agree on problems. It's the solutions that gets them, right? So it's like I'm on the left, like people know I'm on the left. So I don't like corporate greed. Like I think that after COVID, prices have really screwed people over. I think there's been a lot of sort of greedflation, as we call it. Like oh my God, if you live in Florida, you've seen the cost of living go.
Just Publix alone. I used to shop at Publix all the time before, like just before COVID and the first bit of COVID, and I actually used to work at Publix at one point in time. And going from pre-COVID pricing and seeing Publix now, it's like I thought all I do, I get on my phone, I shop on the Walmart app, I go in, pick up, I try to find the cheapest things possible, because it is expensive. Even at Walmart, it's expensive.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of problems with your audio. I'm not sure if it's you. Guys, can everyone hear him fine, or is that just me? Because I don't know if that's
Can you hear me better?
It's almost like roboting.
Can you hear me
we
better?
haven't gotten any comments on it. Let me try to take my headphones out.
I don't know, because also my laptop fan is on, so that might be. I think
I can hear you fine now. I think it might have been me. I think it was my AirPods. Right.
So your Florida video, it's very interesting, because Florida itself as a state has changed a lot. I mean, just from pre-pandemic alone, But
yeah, I know you said you're from Tampa. You guys have had the worst of it.
When the housing craze was going off, everybody's, move to Florida, you can buy a house, just pay $50,000 over asking price in cash. And now, like, especially in the Orlando metro area, there's been so much suburban development, and I would hope that eventually that's going to end, the suburban development, and we see more of like an urbanization trend, especially with the climate change impacts. A lot of people from Helene and Milton, especially in the Tampa Bay area on the west coast of Florida, they're realizing that being so close to the coast is not the best idea, I don't know. What's your take on the Florida and suburbanization of it?
I mean, I think something really important that you can't leave out is all my friends that are in Orlando, they talk about how it's like 3 families in a neighborhood and then everything else is Airbnbs, right? Like it's just really
that is true.
Horrible way to live. And my family likes renting out Airbnbs in Orlando, so I can't even. I'm part of the problem. Man, Florida's growing at such a rate that you're just getting. You see the worst of it in Orlando. Just like those neighborhoods with identical houses, like everything has the same layout. I have friends that'll joke like, if you live in the neighborhood, you could break into anyone's house and find everything super easily because it's just the exact same layout. Like all the bedrooms are the same, everything's in the exact same place. I think downtown Orlando is really nice. Like I was kind of surprised by how nice downtown Orlando is.
So downtown, I was actually there. What was it, last Saturday for the Orlando Pride event, and I hadn't been in a couple years. And Orlando, I mean, Buddy Dyer has been the mayor of Orlando since 2003, I think.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah, I was not familiar with him.
He's been mayor of Orlando for a very long time. there's a lot of single family residences so close to the downtown area. And I see this in St. Pete, Tampa. I don't know much about Miami. I've never really visited Miami or Jacksonville. But like in the Central Florida region, you go from small single family house to large apartment building, even skyscraper, and I don't know. Do you think that Florida will ever change and go towards more of an urbanization trend?
Oh man, I wish. Like I really wish, but I think maybe if like America as a whole did, but I don't really see it happening, especially like with just the way our state demographics have been going. Like we've been getting increasingly conservative. We've been getting a lot of influx from people coming from like New York, California, like places that want more space. Like they want
Yeah.
a little more freedom, and they want it to be a little, or well, I guess freedom in terms of like movement and housing. You know, I feel sorry to say that I do just I have given up a little bit on Florida. Like I'm not sure exactly that this is like the place that I want to keep living. And it's so funny because anytime I'm somewhere else, I'm just like reminded of how drastically different Florida is. You know, especially South Florida. Like I'm from Broward County, and Broward County is such like a weird little wonderful place. Like we're not as eccentric as Miami, but we still got a strange collection of people, and it's just gotten so old in the last couple of years, man. It's changing so much. And like I went to a house party in Orlando like last month, and I was like, oh my god, people here are young. Like people here are like 20, and we're actually like it was so nice to like be out and not just pass by the same like generic like bars and restaurants that have like the retirees at.
Yeah.
So different regions of Florida are always going to be a little different. I know there's like a massive influx of people in Tampa. I know that Tampa seems like a bit better of a place for like younger people, or even Orlando seems like a bit better of a place for younger people than like the Tri-County area where I'm from. But I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, Central Florida, from what I remember as a kid to now, has almost exploded with just suburban growth. I know Tampa itself, they've done a lot of urbanization. I especially after the widening of 275 and I-4 and the Leroy Selman extension, which connected Leroy Selman to I-4. The downtown area has done a lot of revitalization, and St. Pete is building up a lot in their downtown as well. I sort of feel, though, that sometimes that it's more luxury apartments than anything, that are being built. But I sort of feel also it's more of like a generational thing too. Now like boomers are used to the suburbs. And Gen Xers are used to the suburbs. And I think that's what they are looking for and what they're moving here for. And I'm hoping that the trend reverses, especially with the millennials, Gen Z, maybe Gen Alpha. I don't really know much about Gen Alpha. They're still developing on their iPads and laptops and whatnot. But I hope, as a Gen Z or myself, that we can reverse that trend here in Florida and build a better future. Can you imagine? My gut tells me Kamala Harris is going to win in a landslide, and I really hope she does. I don't agree with all of her policies, especially I'm very big on anti-war. Even though having a defense force is necessary, I don't think that we should be contributing to Israel and Palestine and whatnot. But imagine what 8 years of Kamala Harris, possibly imagine Tim Walz gets convinced. 8 years of Tim Walz We've just had we just had 4 years of Biden. Can you imagine 20 years of a progressive-ish?
I don't know. I don't know if we'll get that. As much
Living
as
the dream.
I mean, I'm bigger. I'm bigger on a Walz presidency than a Harris
Oh my God.
presidency personally.
Literally,
But
I cried tears of joy when she picked Tim Walz as the vice presidential pick. Like, best choice she could have gone with.
yeah, well, it was nice talking to you, man. I think I should probably move on to the next person. But I
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
all of your insight. It was nice talking to you. Feel free to stick around. I'd love to talk to you some more if we get the chance. I just want to give everybody the opportunity to come on the stream.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. Thank you. Okay, see Thomas. Okay, so I'm a little confused with the order now. I think we have Carson and then Sean, I believe, because I think Alejandro and Extra Extra I already talked to. So I'll just try to get to them before I get to you guys again. So, hey Carson,
Hello, Andre.
welcome to the stream.
It's been really nice hearing everybody's opinions on everything, and I wanted to call in just because you briefly mentioned JJ earlier, and I talked about him in chat. I actually had a question. What was the first JJ McCullough video you actually watched ever?
Oh man, I really wish I knew. It sucks so hard. You know, when I met him, like I got a chance to hang out with him and he asked me that and I felt so bad that I didn't know how to answer. If I had to guess, it was probably some like flag video back in like 2018-ish. I'd
It's
say.
hard to remember. I have like a couple options that I think are my first. One of them being like how has life changed since your childhood, which was one of them, and then after that, I really got big into his caricature videos that were amazing. One of the first videos I saw of yours was the one you did with JJ about drawing presidents. So that's kind of the connection there. Do you have a favorite of his channel?
Oh my God, a favorite dude.
I
JJ really. Or, sorry, go ahead.
I have his YouTube channel pulled up, which I mean, he has so many. But continue.
Man, I was gonna say JJ is like one of my YouTube goats. You know, it's so funny because like I'd say like my two favorite like history YouTubers are like JJ and Mr. Beat, and it feels like a cop out because those happen to be the ones that I sort of like met and hung out with, right? But that's just sort of virtue of like me being lucky. But a favorite. I think that JJ has such a unique like depth of knowledge, man. I think that he's just the way that he talks about political cartoons is so fascinating. Like before I did that video with him, like he didn't know that we were going to delve into the history or anything. Like he just knew that I was going to show him like some presidential drawings that I did. So everything that he said there was just off the top of his head. I think that his exploring Richard Nixon through political cartoons video is incredible. I think
I really like that one.
like I think that's such a it's such a JJ video, if that makes sense. You know, I think that's such a unique approach that only he could really do. He has a similar video on Clinton that I also think is fantastic. I'm also, as a young man, I enjoy when he does his little like advice videos.
Yes,
right.
He just did one about turning 20, and I just turned 20, so it was really relevant. And I share the same birthday as him, just like
that's cool.
3 years separately. So that was really nice having that conveniently come out at the same time.
Yeah, no, that is nice. I don't know. I think, man, like I admire JJ so much, especially like after I started making these videos myself. I saw like all the effort and all the work that it takes to do them, and he's pumping out like 20-30 minute videos every week. And I remember like talking to him being like, man, like how do you do this? Like how do you do this? He's like, I just work a lot.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. You know, I think no, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say he goes to the library a lot too. I mean, he just researches all the time and is always trying to find video ideas. And I mean, he has so many he wants to do. I'm pretty sure in one of your live streams with him, I mean, he just has well, this might have been a Mr. Beat thing as well, where they just have a Google Doc of just lists of things they want to get around to eventually.
Yeah. No, oh my God. I hung out with Mr. Beat in June, I want to say. And he was like, "What's your next video gonna be?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Oh my God, that's so exciting to not know what your next video is gonna be." And he recorded me for like a video he was gonna do. And he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna post this in August, by the way," which was like 2 months away. And I was like, you know what you're doing 2 months ahead of time? Like, I'm nowhere near that at all.
The amount of pre-planning that he does, Mr. B, just from what I can tell, like that one about visiting Malaysia, I mean, he had that set up for months. I mean, he eventually went there and met with the guy he did an interview with, and I admire that about him. He has a way of producing content. I think it's the same with JJ. It's very admirable how much effort they put into it. I mean, there was a point where Mr. B was a teacher alongside doing that. Obviously, it got to a point where teaching was way more, or not, teaching was less profitable than going and doing YouTube. So, yeah, I mean, I admire those two a lot.
Yeah, I started working my first full-time job this year, and it has been so much harder to keep up with videos since. And it's funny because I'm like, man, I used to have so much free time, and I would not use it like as well as I should have. So that I know, just to think of like Mr. Beat, especially like with like a wife and kids and a full-time job, like putting in like the consistent work for the videos that he did for so long before going full-time is crazy. And that's still something that I'm trying to get a little bit better of a hold on, because like I get home from work and I'm like, oh, I just want to lay in bed and watch TV. Like I love doing the videos, but sometimes you're just so tired, man.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm going through college right now. That's how it is every single day after getting home from classes. But I really, and here's the thing. I mean, we'll be waiting here for the next video. So, I mean, I always get excited when you release a new video. It's just the same with JJ. It's the same with Mr. Beat. So, I mean, you have joined that upper echelon, in my opinion, of people that I really enjoy watching in that like sphere of content, like the political, historical, cultural.
That's crazy, man. I feel like I'm getting mentioned with like the greats. That's like insanely flattering. You have no idea.
I mean,
You know, like it's
I go through, like, I mean, I look through the YouTube channels of like JJ and your channel and Mr. B, and I mean, I've just watched all of them. I mean, I've tried to watch as many as I possibly can, and I still have a couple of your old ones that I have to get around to, but I mean, it obviously shows that red bar at the bottom when you've like finished the video. One of my biggest missed, and you've talked about it several times in live streams, is the spy who stole JFK's heart. I still need to watch that video because I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I know you really enjoyed watching or like making that video.
Yeah, that was one of my personal favorites, just because the editing I think on that one is really good, and I tried my best with the storytelling. Like my sort of original deal, I guess, was that I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I was really into sort of like short films in high school, and I kind of lost that a little bit in college and didn't do that as much. But when I came to YouTube, I always wanted to sort of make, or not always, but I did want to I do have a letterbox extra. I just saw that comment.
Oh, yep.
But I always wanted to make very like story driven, like character driven pieces. You know, I always wanted to convey that, and I felt that was something that like I wasn't really seeing from other YouTubers. Was like these, like you would have like big biography videos, but you wouldn't have sort of like deep dives into like why do they tick in a way that they do. So like a big project of mine for the last couple months has just been figuring that out and how to talk about that. And now I kind of want to bring more production value to it. Like I want to do more filming myself and more of myself like out of my room and not just
you could see that in the Florida video. That was when I remember watching that, I was like, oh, he's outside. for this video.
Yeah. So,
which is something that Mr. B has started doing a lot too, like being on location.
no, Mr. Beat's been doing a great job with that. And it's funny because Mrs. Beat is the drone pilot. I remember hanging out with them, and they were like, "Yeah, you need to get a license to do that." And she has like her pilot's license for it. And I have a drone, and I had been meaning to use that for a video for a while, and I'm glad I didn't because I would have gotten a big fine because I didn't know you needed a license to use it on YouTube.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating, but oh well.
I'd say just kind of talking about like your background and like you really liked character driven and like making films about that. You can tell in your style. I mean, just the kind of like topics you choose and really focusing on like the human aspect of some of these people who are just so at this point so mythologized. I mean, they're like JFK or whatever, or Lyndon B. Johnson. I mean, looking, and I think that's something that the book series does very well, is looking at like the human side of these politicians and these great presidents. Another question I was going to ask was, what do you think about people not really understanding what the president or vice president actually does? Because connecting it back to Mr. Beat, he just made a video about like clearing up misconceptions about what the president actually does with regards to the economy. There's a lot of people pressing Kamala Harris about like what she did or didn't do during the vice presidency. And I'm going to be a social studies teacher. I'd like to teach government. I think it would be, I mean, you got to try to teach these certain things about like what the separation of powers and what presidents and Congress and all these different entities in the government do. But I feel like with older generations, it's just getting harder and harder for them to understand what these entities actually do.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like congratulations on that career goal. I think that's awesome. I think that being a history and government teacher is super commendable. And honestly, I think it's a lot harder than what I do on here, you know. So I admire that a lot, and I wish you the best of luck on that. As far as people understanding what the presidency and the vice presidency does, like what they do and what the positions are, man, it's hard, right? Because I'd be lying if I said that I was like particularly interested in history or politics in school, right? It was really like the 2016 election. I was 15 at the time, and that sort of like got me interested because I just thought it was so ridiculous, and I got into Hamilton, and that was like huge for me to like sort of get it, want to know a little bit more of the context there, and from there I kind of ended up becoming like a history and politics junkie. But if it had just been history in school, I'm not sure that that would have happened for me, and it's crazy because it's something that I'm so interested in and passionate about, and in a lot of ways has sort of like formed my professional career around.
I'm curious actually, like what was your experience like in history class? Was it just reading the textbook and just like very boring, tedious?
I in like in eighth grade, I remember having a teacher who was this sort of like funny guy, and like I'd play Pokemon with him sometime. Like if we had free time in class, we'd like Pokemon battle with him. And I remember like liking him for that reason. And people were always really mean to that teacher, so I kind of like tried to pay more attention in his class just because I kind of liked him as a person. But I couldn't tell you that much about what we covered or what we did. I had two history classes in high school, and my first one was world history, and that was really about like World War One, World War Two, Cold War. It was like really, really based around that. And I remember the teacher he'd tell us not to read the book, we would go through the book as a class, only reading the like subheadings and the headings.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd be like, "That's all you need to know. Now we can talk about it." And that was never like that interesting, honestly. And by the time that I got to U.S. history the following year, which taught a lot of like Gilded Age and like Civil War, I think that I was a lot more interested in it already. So it was kind of like a gradual progression for me, I guess. And Oh, we got people talking about Hamilton.
Yep, I was
In the
actually
chat.
gonna say, like, Hamilton. I talked to other people who are like wanting to become teachers, and it's mostly like elementary education people who like don't have any interest in history, but Hamilton is the thing that they care about like the most. Like that is the thing that gets people into like interested in it.
Man,
I just watched it.
you know, I'm so ridiculously lucky because I've seen Hamilton like 3 times, and I paid for it like none of the times.
Yeah.
Like the first time I ever saw it, I was obsessed with it, and I had a cousin who was with like she was married to a really rich guy at the time, and she was like, "I'll take you on Broadway, sure." And the tickets were like super expensive, and I was like, "I can't believe this is happening." And then the second time, I actually did EduHam, which was a really awesome program. I don't know if they still have that, where they give you a high school curriculum based off of Hamilton, and you get to see the show for $10, and you get to like do a song, and like you have to like write a song or poem or something, and the best ones get to be presented. And then I ended up like winning the Hamilton lottery like a couple of years after that, which was also crazy. So I got ridiculously lucky, and I think more stuff like EduHam would be awesome for people because I think that like Hamilton might be the like you're talking about. Hamilton might be the pipeline for other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of what I'm trying to do is just figure out a way to get people interested at any capacity whatsoever, and if it requires like something like that, I mean that's at the beginning of the year talking about American Revolution, so just trying to get kids engaged in that. We were kind of talking earlier about like the power of the presidency, but then we kind of got off onto Hamilton.
Oh yeah, my bad.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I kind of too.
Okay. Let me properly answer your question. Sorry. Okay. The presidency right now is really about vibes, unfortunately, on a public level. How we change that, I'm not. I think the stimulus packages or the stimulus checks were really interesting. That like the idea of American citizens getting a check in the mail with the president's name on it from the government, that felt like it sort of tapped into a potential political future, right? Of like direct delivery to the public that was really interesting. I think that people understand that the president has like a pretty big authority over foreign policy, right? Like I think they get that, but sort of like the day-to-day presidency and the fact that like, oh, the president wants to do this, but Congress, that just happens a lot. And that's a problem that Kamala is really having is a sort of like, hey, I want to do this, and they're like, why haven't you done it? You've been in office for 4 years, and she can't really say that the vice presidency is completely powerless.
Mm-hmm. Because
so that
I will say I see a lot of people talking about that all the time. I think maybe even Vance said something about like what was she doing for like 4 years as vice president, and if like someone like him is saying that, then I don't even know where we're at in terms of.
Man, I think that's just being disingenuous. I think Vance knows the vice president doesn't say anything.
He is going to be in that role. If he
yeah, I mean Vance, like him or not, Vance is a smart guy. Like he's an intelligent person. I think that's why he's a little scarier than Trump. Honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think I will. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say I see someone in chat talking about Greenland, Trump buying Greenland.
No, I don't think Trump's gonna buy Greenland.
Probably not.
Okay, we'll probably wrap up here just so I can move on to the other people. But I really appreciated the conversation, Carson, and feel free to rejoin later on or to join in the future. I'm having a lot of fun with you, so I think I'll definitely be doing more of these in the future.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you, man.
Nice meeting you too. See ya.
Bye. See ya. Okay, next up we will talk to Alejandro. I got some people in the chat that wanted to rejoin. I will probably get to you guys, but I got some new people as well coming up. And next up, I'll be talking to Alejandro and then Sean, I believe, is the order. So, hi, Alejandro. I'm sorry, I almost missed you, man.
No, it's my fault. I left and then I came back. So yeah.
No, you're good. It's just I saw your name in the queue, and I was like, I don't remember talking to that person, but maybe I just forgot the names.
No.
But it's nice to have you here.
That's great. I'm actually glad you're doing this because I feel like no YouTubers do this kind of stuff. This is something more you'd see on like, I guess, TikTok.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel a little weird because I'm older than you and probably most people here because I'm actually 31. But I enjoy your videos quite a bit, dude. Especially the Nixon ones, dude. I think you actually should make a video about his youth because I think there's a lot of assumptions about Nixon being some crazy dummy type of guy, and it wasn't until I saw some of your stuff that I realized, like, oh, this guy like knows stuff. Um, so, but actually, years ago, I was in a public library that had like some old books. One of the books I found was by Nixon actually, and I remember seeing and being like, "Oh, this must suck, man." But I read like 10 pages out of it. It was like Greatest People, I think was the name of it. So it basically lists like a
Mhm.
bunch of world leaders that he's like, "Oh, this guy's great," and talks about them for like 20, 30 pages or whatever. But I think it kind of shows off how incredibly smart he is, even if you don't like him.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, I mean Nixon. Or sorry, go ahead. You're
no, go
finish your
ahead.
thought. Oh no, I was just gonna add on to what you were saying. I was gonna say, I'm definitely one. If you go back and watch one of the first videos I ever made, it's called "How Kennedy Won," and it's a video that I have sort of mixed feelings about today because I feel like my commentary and my knowledge was a lot more surface level back then, and I sort of just like called Nixon hot headed, and people like rightfully got on me in the comments about that. And like knowing what I know about Nixon now, just like him being very intelligent, very methodical, I mean, like weird guy, right? There's no
Yeah,
denying that. But he's just such an interesting character, and like I don't know. I think we as a society could have a better understanding of Nixon than just sort of like, oh, bad guy who Watergate. Like, yeah, the Watergate is a big part of like who he was, and that says a lot about his character and his own like personal quirks. But I think that I would say that Nixon's probably like top five most interesting presidents.
oh, that says a lot. But yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a lot more character to him than people give. Um,
Mhm.
so I think you've read my comments quite a few times in your live. I always bring up Mexico. uh,
Yeah.
so because I actually like your
Mhm.
video on Brazil as well. Because I mean, I was born here in the U.S., but my family's from Mexico, and I've been there a lot. So I kind of have that understanding of like
Mhm.
being in the U.S. You kind of have I guess, a different understanding of how things are in the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's weird, right? Being an immigrant or like the child of immigrants, having those kind of two countries to analyze politically. I think the I've been wanting to make a Brazil video for a long time, and it took me forever to get around to. And honestly, I felt like so self-conscious making that video because I felt really out of my element. And I was like, oh, like I'm researching a bunch and I'm trying to like make sure I have all my facts together, but I like what if I get something wrong because I just don't know their politics and their history nearly as well as I do with the U.S. And it's funny because when you're thinking about especially with Brazil, thinking about them on the global stage as compared to the US. Like there's a lot of stuff going on with BRICS right now, and Brazil trying to position itself as like more independent from the United States and sort of part of this like secondary world order in a way that is bad for the US but is probably good for Brazil. Like they're talking about having a BRICS currency that the BRICS countries can use among themselves as a alternative to the dollar, which would really, really hurt, really hurt the United States globally, but would
Yeah.
be a huge boost there. You know,
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see.
Mexico's going through the same thing, and it's kind of weird to have, because it's like I'm loyal to the U.S., but I'm also loyal to Mexico, and I'll admit I'm definitely more center right leaning than left. Which currently with Mexico, it's going through the same thing with like a bunch of people want BRIC nations to be allied with Mexico, and it's kind of. I mean, I don't want to get too political with it, but you can clearly tell there's a lot of like foreign influence in Mexico. That's trying to act like it's grassroots stuff. So, but
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm sure
I
that's
don't
going
know that
on.
much about.
So, someone's gonna jump me for this, but I'll just say it. So AMLO, the former president of Mexico, he's pretty far left. Some people would probably describe him as like a socialist, which I guess is a fair assumption. But to be fair, Mexico, the government is a bit more socialist than it is like an American capitalist system. So the government itself is just more left in general. Even their right-leaning parties is like center left compared to here. And AMLO, it's pretty clear he has a very like close ties with the BRIC nations, and especially with China, just because there's a lot of like rhetoric he'll give against the U.S. that's like very like isolationist or Mexico first type of thing. But when it comes to China, he never does that kind of stuff because he wants to be close to them. So that's there's more to it than that, but just to summarize it.
Yeah.
And it's it's just a lot.
I was gonna say I'm not, like I said, I'm not that familiar with Mexico, but like extra said in the chat like what has BRICS ever done, which I think is like a valid point, and someone said they doubt China or India would ever agree to a single currency. Like to my understanding, that it wouldn't be a single currency for all the nations to use all the time. It would just be sort of like an international currency for them to trade amongst themselves. I would have to be more familiar with it to be able to speak on that specific policy. That was just kind of my understanding of it. But as far as like, I don't know if this is what Mexico is doing, but with Lula especially, I get the sense of him trying to position himself as sort of like a mediator between the United States and like Russia or China. Like if you look at him trying to like negotiate, trying to be like a negotiator with Russia and Ukraine, or trying to be a middleman who has a good relationship with both worlds. I don't know necessarily if that's what you'd be seeing with Mexico, but I do think that could potentially. That's me saying this as like someone who knows nothing about Mexico's foreign policy, but being on our sort of southern border, maybe they could be a good negotiating partner. I don't know.
Personally, I don't quite think so. I think Mexico's being used more by BRIC nations, especially by China, than maybe the president thinks. Just because like in Africa, how there's a lot of countries that are getting loans and what's the word, finances from China, but they're taking over like lithium mines, and it's like owned by the Chinese like CCCP members, and there's been like riots and protests against that over in those countries. Well, they're trying to do the same thing in Mexico, even though lithium is something that's nationalized or was nationalized somewhat recently. And
Yeah.
it's weird, man, because it's like populism is going on. It's very like nationalistic populism, but on the left with AMLO and his party.
Mhm.
And it makes me think that it's gonna like, what's the word? There's gonna be backlash. Like I can't imagine BRICS like long term can survive with that kind of mentality, because at a certain point, if you start screwing over like Mexico or Brazil and you want their resources, it's like they're gonna fight for a better deal, even if you're like allies with them, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. No, I understand. I think I'm a bit out of my depth and like personal knowledge on the subject, so I don't have that much to comment, unfortunately. But I do think there's a lot to consider there, and I know
yeah,
people are talking about like free trade between Mexico and the United States
I
and the comments as
100%.
well.
I support that. I always tell everyone this, like, because there's a lot of people in Mexico that want to be like, Mexico should just keep itself away from the U.S. They're not our allies, but it's like we're tied. It's not just a border we're tied with. It's like blood, like we're blood related at this point, because there's so many Mexican Americans here in the U.S. and Americans that live in Mexico as well. So it's just
Mhm.
this isolationism of Mexico is just foolish. So
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like the United States really considers itself blood brothers with a couple countries, right? Like if you look at the UK, like common language, Australia too, probably. Like if you look at Canada, we share the border, common language as well. France, just like we bled, like they helped us out in the revolution, they bled for us. Japan, like the most like our closest trading partner in the East. But Mexico, that's right there, we haven't really had that history with. It's always been it has been a bit colder relationship. I guess I hadn't thought about it as much, and this is making me want to learn a little more about Mexico and the
uh,
Mexico America relationship.
there's a lot of history, of course, probably more so than the U.S.
Mhm.
and Canada. But yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And to bring the election up, that's one of my big pet peeves about the election is that you have Republicans talk about the border and illegal immigrants, but you'll have Democrats kind of not admitting that like the cartel's a problem and illegal immigration can be a problem, but it's like there has to be like a close relationship with Mexico. And to sound like a neocon, one thing that George W. Bush and Clinton and all them had that made them better was that they actually did work with the Mexican government, justify with the cartels and stuff and have more free trade, which with the politics
Mhm.
going on now, it's kind of not viewed the same way.
Yeah, free trades have been getting a lot of flack.
What's going on, man? You don't like your cheap steel from China or anything? Come on, guys.
Yeah, I mean, they're well. I mean, look, Trump won the Rust Belt, then Biden won the Rust Belt, and that's a sentiment that they both really had to play on. There is a significant backlash to NAFTA, and I'd argue that was like really foundational to our political era. So I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, I there's there's an argument for it. I'm not going to say like tariffs are
Mhm.
100% bad. There's obviously a need for it, but like most things, it's just complicated and it's not just a black or white issue.
Yeah, no, I get it. Okay, I think I'll probably move on to the next caller, but I appreciate you coming on, and you made me want to learn a lot more about that. So I appreciate that, and yeah, just thank you for your time. It was nice meeting you, man.
No problem. All
All
right.
right. Okay, next up we got Sean. Hey man,
Hello,
what's
Andre.
up?
Can you hear me all right?
Hi, I feel bad. I've seen you down there for a while now. I'm like, oh my god, he's been waiting for so long.
All good, all good. I left and rejoined.
Oh,
So,
okay. Well, hi. It's nice to have you here.
I wasn't here the first 10 minutes, so can I ask anything like non-political related?
Yeah, sure. Ask whatever you want.
Halloween's right around the corner. What are you gonna be? Any costume ideas?
What am I gonna? Yeah, I have actually was just rushing to get my costume stuff right before. Man, where did I put it? I don't. Oh well, I don't have my hat here. I guess, or I do. I'm supposed to be Walter White,
Oh, nice.
or but it's not exactly going great because I bought a hat on Amazon, but it was supposed to get here in time, but it's not. So I had to go get this hat at Target, and I have a really big head, so it just like it doesn't it doesn't fit on my head all the way. So it's really goofy. Someone asked if I don't have a bald cap. I was just hoping that it would cover my hair enough, but I don't know if I
Right.
could squeeze into this without giving myself an aneurysm. So I have to think about what I'm doing tomorrow.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
So this is a question related to a homework assignment I'm doing right now. So
Okay.
it is about music of the decade, right? And how it like had an
Mhm.
impact on American culture. So I have the song Video Killed the Radio Star, which would be all about like how
Mhm.
MTV took over. And then I have I don't think I can swear, F the Police by NWA.
No, feel free
Kind
to
of talking
swear.
about
It's
like
okay.
the war on drugs and how that affected black communities. Do you have any, because I know you're a fan of music. I'm not sure if you're like the biggest 80s music
Mhm.
fan. Any ideas?
Mhm. Oh man, I'm a huge fan of like rap music. First and
Right.
foremost, I love rap music. Just like one of my biggest passions. I always say I um I would have been equally likely to start a channel about hip hop music and about US history. This just happens to be
Right.
like the path that I went down. As far as 80s music, I'm not terribly familiar. I'll know just like a couple assorted dad rock songs like
Right.
here and there, but not too much. Ooh, as far as decade like sort of like defining songs, hmm, I think All Right by Kendrick Lamar would be a huge one more recently, but I don't know
For sure.
exactly if that's what you're looking for. I think that's definitely it's not as aggressive as Fuck the Police, but I think it certainly touches on a similar sentiment, right? And I think it's at least culturally probably a bit of of a modern equivalent, even if it can't be villainized in the same way.
Right.
But that sounds like a really interesting project, and I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Um, and then, oh, you want to hear more about the project?
Yeah, sure. Or any other questions you have, totally cool. Didn't mean to put you on the spot like that.
All good, all good. Um, I was writing a little bit about how basically like the medium has changed, and I kind of gave some context by talking about like, the big one, FDR, kind of using radio for the first time. So I kind
Hmm.
of was just writing about how like video, like with MTV kind of like being so commonly seen, kind of changed a lot of things, like the way people consume media. I was just writing about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, like if you're looking at MTV, I think not Reagan, I think Clinton sort of embodied that era perfectly, right? Like going on
Hmm.
Arsenio Hall and playing the
Oh yeah.
saxophone and being man. Bill Clinton was such a perfect representation of America in the '90s, and I think it's so fun when the president can kind of be like a mascot for the country. I think
Right.
for better or worse, I think Trump's kind of been the mascot for our country also like during the last couple of years. Even during the Biden presidency, I think Trump has kind of still been the most defining figure because I think the most important aspect about him is him in opposition to Trump. You
Hmm.
know, so I think it's there's definitely, and this is a little bit what my next video about, like how presidents use the means of communication of their time. Like you mentioned, Bill Clinton with the radio, then you get like Ronald Reagan and JFK being like really good on camera, really good on TV. Reagan, of course, being the movie star. JFK supposed to have like the movie star looks, just being really good on camera. And now you get Trump, who's like the master of Twitter. He can make people angry and capture people's attention. And I think it's really fitting that we have like a reality show president in like a reality show era,
Right. One more question. Obviously you know about Mr. Beat. Big fan.
Yeah.
One video he did that I've been thinking a lot about recently is when he was talking about how essentially expanding the size of like, I think he said the House of Representatives, but also like the Senate, like uncapping the House, because now currently it's like the least like representative, just because the population of the country has risen so much. What do you, I guess, how do you feel about that? And do you have like any solutions to kind of helping the country be more representative? Any ideas?
Yeah. I think uncapping the House is a great idea. I think
Yeah.
that the way that the founders sort of thought about it was that your representative in Congress was supposed to be this like person that was subject to the whims of the people. They were supposed to be deeply entrenched like in the community. They were supposed to be representative of like these small specific like localities, right? And we're up to, I think Thomas Atkinson just said in the chat that each representative represents close to 750,000 people. Like that's insane. Like you have like that's more people than Wyoming has. Right? And Wyoming has 2 senators. I've brought this idea up in the past about the Senate because I do think I know people talk about like tyranny of the majority and whatever, and that's why we need the Senate. But I do also feel that the Senate could be a little more proportionate. Like maybe there could be a base amount of senators that everywhere got, and then for each additional, I don't know, let's say like 5-10 million residents, you got an additional senator. Because if you look at like Wyoming having 2 senators versus California having 2 senators, at what point is that like tyranny of the minority? Trying to fight tyranny of the majority. I just don't think that that's exactly fair. It's funny. Extra just said, "What's more evil, the Supreme Court or the Senate?" And I think like the fact that that's such a popular sentiment right now. Like the Supreme Court wasn't supposed to be political, but now it certainly is, and we exist in that reality, and we have to sort of figure out where to go from here. Because I don't think we could make the court any less political. Whether like I don't know if electing the justices would be a good idea. Maybe it would if they're going to be like as outrightly political as they are today. But the whole point of them was supposed to be that they weren't subject to the whims of election. I don't know. I guess I don't have all the answers, which isn't what YouTubers generally say.
Right. Do you think basically like we've opened the box, there's no going back with the Supreme Court, it's always going to be political? Or do you think we'll ever, I don't think there's that much there's backlash to the Supreme Court, but not about them I guess being political. Do you ever think they could like move back to being more partisan, well, less political?
Man, I mean, I think we have to think about how we got here, right? Like you look at Roe v. Wade, and you look at the entire an entire wing of the conservative coalition. Like Reagan was really able to unify like the country club Republicans, the evangelicals, and oh my god, why am I forgetting the third faction off the top of my head? But he was able to unite like a bunch of different Republicans. And you have this entire strain of the conservative movement that is explicitly directed towards getting rid of Roe v. Wade. And that's just like a multi-decade long project. And it ultimately culminates in someone like Donald Trump, who's very blunt, very direct, and just says, I will appoint judges that will repeal Roe v. Wade. Right. So it took us like 50 years to get here based off of the Roe consensus. And I think that honestly, this was the logical conclusion of that. But whether or not, because the Supreme Court is going to make those decisions, right? Like, what the push the envelope, whether that be like Brown v. Board, whether that be Roe v. Wade, whether that be Obergefell, with gay marriage. Like, that's going to happen sometimes, and there's going to be backlash to that. I guess with Roe, we just saw something such an organized backlash that I think a lot of people like kind of felt in the abstract, right? Like they didn't think it was going to get overturned, but here we are. So I don't know exactly, like, if it took us 50 years to get to this point, I don't know how long it would take us to depoliticize it, because like I said earlier, everything is politics now. Like, politics is
Right.
culture, and it's hard to picture a president on either side of the aisle just approaching or appointing a Supreme Court justice that isn't going to be in alignment with them. Like, I don't think you haven't seen that from a Democrat, you haven't seen that from a Republican, even if the Republicans are a little more egregious as far as it goes,
Right.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not answering these very directly, but I just don't have the answers, man.
They're big questions for sure. If you had the answer, you'd be making millions. You'd be changing the world. One more I thought of. If Harris wins, what's one thing you want to see the most from her administration?
Oh my God. That's such a big question. What's one thing?
It
Okay,
could be
I'm
a
gonna
few if it's
say
easier.
realist, like things that are within the realm of like possibility. I'd love to see the child tax credit come back.
Mhm.
I think that was a ridiculously popular policy. I think that it is crazy that ever stopped. I think
Right.
that like you just have this really popular policy that cuts child poverty significantly, and we just kind of let it lapse. And I think that like there are more ambitious things that I would like to address, but as far as like things that are on her agenda that I think would be an immediate good for the country and that I think are politically viable, I'd say the child tax credit.
Right. Could you go into that a little bit more? Just educate me.
No, sure. I mean, basically during COVID, you had the child tax credit, which provided a lot of support to families that had children. You basically just, I'd have to check the specific amounts that it was. Child tax credit in 2020. The audience could probably educate us a little bit on that. But basically, it was just this man, I'm just completely blanking right now. I'm so sorry.
All good. All good.
But basically, it just provided people a tax credit based off the amount of children that they had. That was a huge assistance during COVID in a time of just like complete uncertainty. And I think I mentioned this earlier with the stimulus checks. I think COVID just kind of provided a moment where we did politically unconventional things and some things that I think are actually going to be the future of politics, of people getting that sort of like direct, like, oh, the government actually did something for me. Like, I'm getting this material benefit that's not just this thing in the abstract. Here, Thomas saved my Neanderthal brain by saying 3,000 for each child between 6 and 17 years old and 3,600 for each child under $6, under age 6, and I think
Right.
that like that's just so universally popular, and that even fits in with the sort of like JD Vance like theory of Republican politics. Like theoretically you do want to be encouraging people to have children. Like I'm a really pro family person. Like I think that people should be able to have as many kids as like they want. And raising kids is one of like the most important things you can do for society. That's what keeps society going. I think we should offer those people financial assistance. Like, part of the reason you see people getting married less and having less kids is because it's just really, really expensive. Like, I'm 23. I don't know how old I'm going to be when I get to have kids. Like, but
Right.
I'd be lying if I said that like finances weren't going to be a huge impact on that. You know,
Right.
I think we should provide a social safety net to people, which the audience seems like pretty generally in agreement. Like it seems like a pretty left wing audience, so I don't think we'll get too much pushback on that. But that is like something I stand pretty firmly on.
Right. I think that's all I got. Thank you for your time. I love the
All right.
content.
No, thank you so much, man. I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate your thoughtful questions as well. And feel free to join back again or to come back on in a future stream.
Thank you, Andre.
All right, it was nice meeting you, man.
Nice meeting you.
Okay, see ya. All right. Okay. Next up, we got Elijah. And hey, man, how you doing? Sorry, you might not have been ready for that. I I just kind of put you on the spot right there. I also threw the link into the chat for
Hello,
anyone that
can
might
you
want
hear
to
me?
join. Yeah. Hey, what's up?
All right. Um, um, uh, I'm, I'm well. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing? All right. Well, you just said that you're well. My bad. Of course, I have it. I'm okay. Been having fun tonight. Been taking questions, getting to talk to you guys, and getting to know you guys a little bit. You could feel free to ask any questions or talk
Good,
about
good.
anything that you'd like to talk about.
Um, I guess I would want to talk to you a little bit about
Hello. I'm sorry.
I just want
I
to
don't know if
talk
I
to you
can hear you right now.
a little bit about America's foreign policy.
Okay.
And the sort of direction you think that's headed in, because I think that's something that the president actually, as you mentioned earlier, does have some control over. It's not like
Mhm.
the people who think the president controls monetary policy or whatever. So I'm just sort of interested. I guess what I'm sort of really been thinking about is the degree to which a lot of skepticism in the American public towards alliances such as NATO seems to have really grown in the last 10 or so years. And I don't think it's entirely like a Trumpism thing, although I think that is obviously the most obvious thing you can point at. I think it sort of exists a little bit maybe on the more populist left as well. People like Jill Stein and whoever, and maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a little bit as well. So I was just sort of wondering, when you look at things like, polling of like the American public on things like assistance to Ukraine, compared to say even in Canada or in Western Europe, why do you think the American public is so much more skeptical of things like aid to Ukraine?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great question, and that's something that I've been thinking about a lot myself. As we kind of reflect on on the Biden presidency as it comes to an end, I think that if you ask Joe Biden, he'd probably tell you that one of the great accomplishments of his presidency has been strengthening NATO, has been sort of like deepening those ties that we have with them, and kind of trying to reassert our place at the head of this global order. I think that like obviously the United States goes through periods of isolationism, right? And I think that right now, like, I know you mentioned Trump. I think something that Trump spoke to very uniquely was just this sort of feeling of being discontent with like the neoliberal order, I guess. And that includes both like the economic order that we have within the United States and the sort of neoliberal world order that we've been used to in the last couple decades. And I think that does come with skepticism towards international alliances in general. I think that from a right wing perspective, just the idea of like, oh, we're giving these other countries money and we're not getting anything necessarily material in return, even though that's not something that I would agree with. Like, I support funding Ukraine. I think that it's a very easy sort of scapegoat and thing to get upset about. I think that also, like, if as far as Trump goes, you can look at like the perfect phone call with Zelensky and get sort of sort of political reasons towards that. But as far as like the populist left goes, I haven't seen too much necessarily about them being super against Ukraine aid, but that might just be a blind spot of mine. I see more opposition to aid of Israel. I think she Palpatine just left a comment about that as well. Though there are certainly tankies that are going to be pro Russia, like Thomas just said. Oh, I think that frankly that might just be like foreign policy in that terms might just be something that the American public doesn't think a great deal about, and they just see us sort of sending like billions to other countries. Now that we're far removed from a Cold War context, I think that might just be a little less top of mind for people than it used to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. For context, I live in Britain. I used to live in Canada, and in Britain, you often hear things like foreign aid is sort of first on people's mind as like a populist thing to try and cut. But foreign aid as sort of, it's like people, it's money. It's really horrible that people do it. It's like money for people in really extreme poverty. That sort of gets attacked by a lot of the more populist right, but never sort of money to Ukraine. If you sort of, we did have like a populist candidate in the general election, and as soon as he said anything, just the mildest thing about not funding Ukraine, it just completely tanked his numbers, like entirely. And I think, and yeah, I can speak a bit of French, and I follow French politics as well, and a very similar thing would happen there if someone tried that same sort of thing. So I think it just sort of, I think I'm just sort of interested in, before sort of Harry Truman, really, America was a little bit of an isolationist place, and to some degree always had been, to varying degrees. And I sort of wonder whether you think that's America's default state, whether the Cold War was actually the exception. And America's default state is we're an ocean away from any other great power. We just use that. We don't have a war because we have an ocean.
Well, so I think the thing about the post-war era and I guess just the Cold War more broadly is that you really do see America coming out of both world wars as just this hegemonic world superpower, right? With the Soviet Union as its foil. And I think that when Americans understood themselves there as like sort of the head of the world order, it was a more acceptable thing. I think that just the Cold War provided easy positioning for that. I think that helped people sort of accept that role. But I think that as you look at the war in Iraq, especially, the idea of America being the head of the world order, of being the world's police, starts to have a very negative connotation. It starts to involve us getting into like these wars that people don't really understand and that aren't coming from necessarily honest places. Like especially when with Iraq, I think that it's difficult to overstate the amount that the Iraq War completely changed the idea of foreign involvement among the American people. I think that that sort of cemented this idea of like we should stay out of it, we should stay out of foreign wars. So even when you look at something like the war in Ukraine, where I think it is in the United States' best interest to provide aid, I think it is like just obviously it's like you don't want Russia to be able to invade another European country with no consequences, and the public more broadly might just still have a bad taste in their mouths from America's foreign wars and just on a vibes base, which I'm like unfortunately have to talk about it because that is that is just the level that people are approaching this on. The idea of like we're just sending money to this far away overseas government isn't exactly like super appealing. Whether or not it's like America's natural sort of like America's natural state is to be isolationist, I don't know anymore. Right? I think we could still be in a period of backlash, and I think I don't know, I'm curious to see what comes next.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. You don't know until time passes. Um,
Mhm.
I think you're right to bring up Iraq. I think I'm sort of curious. Obviously, Britain was one of the not too many countries that sort of joined in on that. I'm sort of curious whether you think Iraq actually did more damage to perceptions of these countries' foreign policies, particularly America's, within their own domestic populations rather than the rest of the world at large to a degree, like particularly the rest of the world outside of the Middle East. Because it's hard to really see why someone in, let's say, a BRICS country like India or Brazil would feel too strongly about it because it's not.
Yeah, honestly, I'd have to be a little more educated on that myself, like the rest of the world's reaction to the Iraq War. Um, Man, that's a really interesting question. I'd like to learn more about that. I don't think I can properly answer that with what I know right now.
Well, that's fair enough. No, yeah. Um, the other thing about sort of free trade, which sort of, which is obviously, you mentioned earlier, is getting a lot of flack. I feel like even when I sort of comment on your channel, I feel like I'm always sort of like very tacitly defending free trade, saying, well, no, it's actually a good thing. And yeah, and I will,
Mm,
like, if someone wants to, I will defend free trade to the hill. I've seen what it does when countries, have free trade and sort of give it up. It doesn't end well. Um, and I think it's sort of interesting how the degree to which, in America, obviously the populist right has really gotten all in on being sort of quite anti-free trade. What I think sort of quite interesting is how being opposed to free trade, and I've noticed this isn't something people really mention, was not so long ago considered quite a left-wing thing. Even as recently as like when the World Trade Organization was founded, you had all the Seattle protests. Bill Clinton was considered quite a big exception, actually, for being a Democrat that was pro-free trade. The Democrats were seen as a more anti-free trade party. You want, even in Canada, for example, the Conservatives were a lot more supportive of it than the Liberals and the NDP when NAFTA was being signed. And even all the way back to like the formations of the EEA in Britain, the Liberals and Conservatives in Britain were a lot more supportive of it than the Labour Party back then. And I think in a lot of places, being opposed to free trade is still something of a more left-wing thing than a more right-wing thing. People like Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush were very strongly for free trade, for example. Um,
mm.
do you think that there's like a long term, do you think, that still is a part of left-wing populism being opposed to free trade? Do you think, the Democrats, particularly as that sort of faction within the party, I think it is a lot more powerful than it was 10 years ago, the more left-wing populist part of it. Far from being dominant, of course, but I think it's grown. Do you think there's a point where the Democrats sort of become fairly big on tariffs? Or do you think that's
Yeah, I mean, I think that we as a country have been just kind of going in that direction, right? Like you see like that was a big factor in the rise of Donald Trump, right? Was the fact that he was just this sort of unconventional Republican, right? That will talk about trade, that will talk about the war in Iraq, that will sort of talk trash about the Bushes, you know. And I think that trade was one of the foundational parts of his entire just political project. And you look at it, and Biden has been more protectionist than people would have expected him to be, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that represents a really big shift in the American consciousness overall. I think that the thing about Biden is that he's really tapped into public sentiment, right? Like, I think Biden sort of goes where the public goes, and that's always been very central to him as a politician. I think that it would be interesting to see, like, the question that you're asking. I think like there's like let's say we get a future like Bernie Sanders adjacent president, right? I think that would firmly solidify Democrats like as a more protectionist party again, like what you were talking about. But I think the true test of it will be getting someone in there like a generic normie Democrat, like a Gavin Newsom or a Gretchen Whitmer, and see what their policy on trade is, right? Like Biden, he's a little more protectionist, but he's also like a kind of finger in the wind guy. So if we have someone who might be a little more ideologically just like true center of the Democratic Party, like a Newsom or a Whitmer, I think that their position on it would kind of speak more than anything we've seen so far.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you think them going for like do you think this switch for Biden to Kamala, which I have no doubt has like helped the Democrats, do you think in Pennsylvania specifically it might have hurt them slightly?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, Biden has deep ties in Pennsylvania. He was born there. Delaware obviously is basically just a suburb of Pennsylvania. Uh, listen, no hate to any Delaware people out there. I man, what if they hurt them in Pennsylvania specifically? See, I thought that Harris would struggle a lot more among the sort of like white working class, like blue wall voters that the Democrats really need. And I completely misread the political situation because those seem like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin seem to be her easiest pathway to victory right now. Like she's more likely to win them than she is Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, you know. So
Yeah.
Oh, it's tough, but it's also tough to say because Biden was doing so bad towards the end of his time in office that I'd say it's kind of hard to not improve. I'd have to look specifically at how Biden was, or sorry, lost my train of thought. What was I saying? I was saying,
You're saying
I'd
about
have
how
to
bad
see
Biden was
specifically
doing?
how Biden was polling in Pennsylvania. Like I see like the sentiment there. Like maybe Kamala is probably doing worse in Pennsylvania than Biden in his prime would have, but I would think that Harris is probably doing better than Biden was at the end of his run.
Yeah, and in like Michigan and Wisconsin, which seem like, you know, the safest of the swing states, right?
Yeah.
From
No,
I suppose
Wisconsin's really close.
Nevada's such an odd one because it's one people have had their eyes on for so long, but it's been really consistently Democratic for a very long time. Like it even went for Hillary, right? Which is what's really odd about
Oh, but
Nevada.
it's
But there's not
so
many electoral
close.
votes.
Yeah, and because Harris, if she wins Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, she wins the election. She only wins it with 272, which is incredibly close. But I guess she doesn't necessarily need Nevada. I would personally right now still say that she wins it, but everything has been going in Trump's direction lately, and it's just a matter of how far that momentum goes.
Yeah. I think with the polling as well, I think
Mhm.
people would probably do well to look a little bit less at the polling because there's always going to be some group being oversampled or undersampled, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was
I
like,
think
you
with
know,
sorry, I was
it,
going to say that I think with that
yeah,
we should probably move on to the next person. I'd love to keep
and the,
talking to you, but it's getting late, and I want to make sure that I get to everybody.
yeah,
It must be so late over in the UK. Oh my god, I didn't even think about
uh,
that.
it's nothing to me. But before you go, if it's all right, I wanted to say that I think you should do more on. I know you obviously said you didn't have as much knowledge on it, but doing things on Brazil, you know, there's an awful lot of coverage of like American politics, you know, especially in like the English language media sphere. Like there's a lot of it. So if you have like enough knowledge to cover like a smaller country, wherever that is, obviously Brazil's a very big country, but obviously you don't see a huge amount of its coverage in the English language media, then that's something you should definitely do. I don't know how well it performs algorithmically compared to content on America, but it's sort of I I think it's sort of valuable just because there's less of it.
Yeah, no, I would love to do that, and I'd love to cover other countries in general, and I've made an effort um to cover the UK election. I wanted to cover the French election, but I didn't get the chance to. But Brazil is
Mhm.
definitely something that I'm going to revisit, and I appreciate that because I have thought about doing other countries, but I do just kind of have to I guess make the plunge into like reading the books and doing the research because I guess I've lived and breathed American history for so long that it's so easy. You know, like for the Brazil video, I had to sit down and like meticulously like research every little portion of it. But with the US video, I can like have the broad strokes of what I want to talk about sort of figure it out and do my research and kind of like it's easier to get it out there, but I think that it's definitely worth doing. So I appreciate you saying that.
All right. Thanks for talking.
No, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it, and thank you for watching the videos. All right. Okay. I will talk to Thomas A and Extra Extra, who are still in the chat. Then after that, I will probably log off for the night because I'm very tired, guys. So right now, I will bring on Thomas A. Hey, it's
Hello
nice to have you
again.
back, man.
Hey. So lots of good discussions. It's I've been taking notes to sort of reference back to. So I know free trade was definitely a bigger one of the topics that's been discussed. Um, I'm curious to my take on it is I think free trade should be used more strategically. Um, in terms of our allies, we should definitely have free trade agreements with our allies, the countries within both of the Americas, and progressive democracies around the world, just regardless of location. Um, the having a more protectionist stance, I feel like is going to be inevitable if we want to see the union strength return, because that I mean, and I think that's a large part of why Trump in 2016 was able to, make that unexpected sweep through the Rust Belt states and break the blue wall that would traditionally have voted more on the Democratic side, because he spoke to the realities that people were living it through, that especially with the NAFTA agreement, you saw a lot of outsourcing and a lot of the manufacturing capabilities of the United States go to countries where it's cheaper to produce said things, and I think that did start though more so with Nixon, and was it detente? How is it pronounced? When
Detente,
he opened
yeah.
up, detente, opening up those relations with China. I think it stretches that far back for offshoring, building over the decades. But do you think that if we want stronger unions, that can happen with free trade?
So I support like targeted tariffs. I like obviously what Trump's been talking about with just doing like sweeping tariffs all around is kind of
That's
ridiculous, and
noble.
I don't think he would even do that if he got into office. But I think that like specific areas, like I think I was a huge supporter of the CHIPS Act. Like I think that just boosting U.S. manufacturing, specifically in areas that, like, if you look at COVID, how messed up we were with the supply chains, like that exposed big vulnerabilities within our own country. So I think we have to take a look at what are the industries that we are the most dependent on and try to recenter our domestic production around that. And I think targeted tariffs in those areas would be the most beneficial.
In regards to chips, that sort of made me think the lithium mine. I don't know if you had read about it. The Biden administration approved a lithium mine in Nevada, and supposedly it holds enough lithium to completely supply like a green revolution with lithium batteries and whatnot. But if the mine actually got built, it would there's a wildflower that would go extinct. So obviously, there's a lot of things that reshoring and focusing more on the U.S. production side of things would have environmental impacts. Do you think that I don't know. I don't know how to phrase it. Do you think that we should prioritize more centralization of production here in the United States is better, or maintaining the environment and is more par for course?
So I haven't read specifically about about that mine, but I do think that because if you look at chips, for example, right? I think the biggest issue with chips being manufactured in Taiwan is that Taiwan is in the sights of our biggest our biggest international rival right now. Like if China takes Taiwan, we're cooked. Like just plainly, like we have no chip independence, and that is our like biggest manufacturing priority, like the biggest thing that we need to get sorted out. Like as like extra and Thomas are talking about in the chat, like having a lithium mine inside of the United, yeah, like. Or oh wait, sorry, I just realized that you're Thomas Adkins. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just reading as Thomas. Dude, I'm sorry. I woke up at 6 today. I worked till 5. I got home and I did this stream. I'm so tired. Yeah, sorry. Like yeah, I think that wildfire might just have to go. R.I.P. Like unfortunately, I just like hearing the broad strokes of it. I do think that that's something that I would support, but I'd probably have to read up a little bit more on it.
I have two quick things, and then a third question. I'll try to make them quick. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I know you're tired.
Oh no, you're good.
What is your take on court packing?
Court packing. Ooh. Oh man. I don't know.
I was the way I sort of thought about it. We have, I think, is 13 court districts in the U.S. I don't see why we couldn't have one that would technically represent each court district.
Yeah, I think that, so I would 100% support court expansion. I think the biggest issue with court packing is just like the partisanship of it. Like
Right.
that was a big thing. Like people remember Trump being like, "Are you going to pack the court? Are you going to pack the court?" And that's like FDR, super popular domestically, and his first like big political hit that he never really recovered from was his court packing attempt. Like that was what sort of like kind of brought a cool to the New Deal. And I think that see here's the thing. I think that politics is ruthless. I think that people are always going to do what they can get away with. Like someone talked about Mitch McConnell blocking Obama's Supreme Court appointment, right? Like that is like obviously that's not like you shouldn't do that. Like from on a moral level, that's wrong. But like in terms of politics, like people are just going to do whatever they can get away with. So I think when you get on a soapbox and you're like, Republicans were dishonest and they were hypocritical and they took this away. Like, yeah, and you probably should have done the same thing if you were in power, right? Like that's good politics, unfortunately. And that's part of the reason why I don't want to work in politics is because I like being moral.
Yeah.
I do my best to.
Yeah, no, I had always had that ambition, but you gotta not be a good human sometimes to get things done.
Yeah, but to finish answering your question, I guess I see it difficult. I think it's really difficult for Democrats to pull that off politically with adding 4 of their own justices in the case of there being 13. I think there might have to be some sort of like compromise. I don't know if this is me being like West Wing brained. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but there's the the president the president gets the Republican, so he has a Supreme Court justice appointment, and the Chief Justice is a conservative. So he convinces the Chief Justice to step down so he could appoint a liberal Chief Justice in exchange for appointing a conservative Associate Justice to the court as well. And it's like this compromise thing, and it's bipartisan, and it's like the most West Wing thing ever, right? I don't know if that would be too West Wingy to do like maybe
if they got the
3 Democrats and a Republican, or 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans or something. And that's not even something I've thought about like thoroughly, just off the top of my head from your question that kind of popped up.
That's honestly, I didn't really think about it. That all of a sudden having the chance to put 4 more people up there. Obviously, the Supreme Court is something that impacts things for decades. So having those 4 may be seen as controversial and may read the popularity hit that could impact downline elections. Have you ever watched an Alan Fisher video?
I don't think so. That name sounds a little familiar though.
So, I know, and you've probably seen it. We have Brightline in Florida, and I see it all the time now because I work close. Yeah, the Philly chain. Yeah. He had a video about the nationalization of the American railroad system. And I know that's like a really big topic, and it encompasses a lot of things. But what would your take on? Would you think that could be done? Do you think possibly it would be beneficial or more negative?
I think it would be beneficial. I don't know if it's politically viable or politically viable in the United States. Honestly, I feel like Americans kind of run from the word nationalization, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of public transport. I would like to see it more. The Bright Line is ridiculously expensive, by the way.
Oh my god, It's like
Oh my
$129 for a one-way trip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I would like to see the US have more rail infrastructure, but we just I it might be a bit doomer of me to sort of have trouble seeing that. I feel like we'd have to reorient so much of our culture. As much as I'd like to see it, I feel like we're such a car heavy people, like
Yeah.
that, like especially, oh my God, if you look at like cars just keep getting bigger and there's more and more trucks everywhere.
And
Like people
the fuel efficiency standards. That's why you saw more because they're classified as light trucks, SUVs. So the fuel efficiency standards were different. That was like their little loophole that they put in.
Yeah.
More pedestrian deaths.
Okay. I'm sorry. I think I'm gonna have to cut it a little bit short, just because I do have to get going kind of soon. But
Discord.
I should. I know I've been wanting to for so long. A friend of mine offered to help me out, and I think I'm gonna take him up on it because I would love to have more conversations like this. But I'm sure I'll be talking to you again. I'm sorry that I had to cut it short.
No
It's
worries,
just
you're all good.
getting late, and I'm tired.
I get
Okay.
no worries.
Okay, see you, man. Thanks again. And then, last but not least, we're bringing back Extra.
Hey, what's up?
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so I
Hi.
do have a couple of questions. I don't want to, keep you on for too long, but
Oh,
have you
no.
read Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance?
I have not. Oh, my camera shut off. My bad. Hold up. My camera was not built to withstand almost 3 hour stream. Wait, how do I do this? Sorry, I started using the camera that I use for recording my videos because the quality is a lot better, but it died, so I have to switch to. Okay, there you go. I hope that's not too jarring.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No,
I've
you're good.
not read Hillbilly Elegy. I almost. I kind of choose my books in like the spur of the moment. And a couple weeks ago, I got so close to starting it, and then I was like, "Oh, maybe later."
Yeah. I mean, I think, if he does, if they do win, then I think it might be like a must read. It's not a must read, but
Mhm.
then I think it becomes far more important to read just to see, how he drew those conclusions about, populism. And he's just like the biggest bootstraps guy. He's like, my life sucked and I was able to pull myself up by my bootstraps, so why can't you? And I don't think he acknowledges that just because he was able to grow up in a shithole and rise above that, not everyone. I mean, he's just like he's a naturally, you said this earlier, he's just a smart guy. There should be social and welfare programs for people. Unfortunately, not everyone is smart. I just think that everybody should have a livable wage, etc. And
Yeah.
but he's a talented writer, so it's not a bad read. But yeah, I recommend. Also, do you feel any particular way about YIMBYism and NIMBYism? Like, like yes in my backyard, no in my backyard. Policies on like housing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big urbanization guy. Like Thomas was talking a little bit about that. Like I'm a big fan of walkable communities. I'm a big fan that it's getting to me.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of just like multifamily housing. I think that I don't know, like even just myself, like I just want to live somewhere more walkable. I have to drive every single place that I go. I think that a big part of why Americans kind of romanticize college is because it's a time where a lot of them do live in walkable communities with like their friends nearby, where all their resources are here. And I think it should be like if you look at like American towns like 100 years ago, a lot of them were walkable and a lot of them were charming and did have these sort of like vibrant downtowns that did get sort of like torn down in favor of like car-centric infrastructure. And I would love to see more of that in the future. I'm not like super well versed on like all the details of like policy and like what explicitly like we need to change, but that's like something I'm broadly in support of.
Okay, so okay, another question. So I found your channel through I think you did a video on paper towns, which is something I was like looking for because oh my gosh. So I'm very opinionated on John Green, and it's not all positive, but growing up, Paper Towns was one of like my favorite novels, and I'd like reread it. So I was just like looking for like, you know, more stuff on it, and that's how I found your channel. And then I saw that, you know, you did like politics too, and that's another interest. So I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this is great. So I was just wondering, are you a big John Green guy, you know, or like his books or Crash Course or however else you know him?
My God, that is not the question I expected to get. Number one, you might be like the only person who ever found me from that video, because that's like one of my smaller videos, and it's before my channel got a lot bigger too. So the thanks for being around that long. John Green is like super foundational to like me as a creator. Honestly, I don't know if that's like visible or not, but
I kind of had some vibes.
Yeah, I remember.
Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
One of my other big loves is literature, and I'm kind of like not anti, but you know, I don't really like YA, and all he writes is like young adult fiction, and that's just like a pet peeve of mine. So it's kind of like I'm obsessed with all of his works, but it's like kind of in like an antagonistic way, which like maybe is bad, but
he's got that tuberculosis book coming out. That might be more in your way.
My favorite by him is it's the one that's not YA. It's the Anthropocene Reviewed, where it's just about his life. So I love him, but I don't know. I'm kind of anti John Green novels, but I do love Paper Towns.
Yeah, I've never been super big on his novels. I wish I was. I remember I have like a signed copy of Turtles all the way down because I pre-ordered it. And I felt bad for like not really enjoying. Like I just never really enjoyed his novels that much. But I just like I remember being 13 and watching Vlogbrothers, and that just being like so foundational to me, both as like a human being and just like how I think about like writing. And I remember Hank Green made science interesting to me for the first time by just talking about how like insane the idea of like this never-ending universe was. And I don't anytime like I'm down, I could sort of go back to like a Vlogbrothers video and feel like I'm like 13 again, and there's like all these possibilities, and I'm learning new things. But I really admire them and their work ethic and their outlook, and I don't think this channel would exist without them, probably.
Yeah, they do a lot of great work. All right, another political question. What are your opinions on specifically like in the 2024 race, like the third party candidates? So, you know, I think that's just going to be Stein and then RFK Jr. And then if we're going a little more niche, then it's going to be like Claudia De La Cruz and those types of people. Do you have an opinion on any of the candidates, or like how do you feel about like third party voting?
I mean, I tend not to be okay. I don't think you should shame anyone for your vote. Like, I'm really, really against that. I think that if someone in their like heart of hearts wants to vote green or something, like I disagree with it, and I wouldn't do it myself. But like, I'm a big believer that candidates need to earn your vote.
Okay.
Right. Like, I don't think anyone's entitled to your vote. I think that's a huge mistake that Democrats make, is just talking like that. I think they come off as super preachy, and I think they come off as like the caricature that the Republicans try to paint them as when they do that. I remember first getting into politics and like taking a political quiz during like the 2016 election cycle, and it was like, you should be in the Green Party, and I was like, even like as a dumb like 15, 14-year-old who didn't know anything about politics, I was like, No. I was like, I don't want to do that. So I'm a much bigger fan of like working within the party, like a Bernie Sanders, like a AOC. Because I think it's undeniable. Like, look at I've said this so many times throughout this live stream, but like the Biden presidency versus like the Obama presidency is a monumental shift. Like, there are significant like leftward. Like there was a significant leftward drift in terms of like domestic policy. Foreign policy could be a different conversation.
Yeah.
and then
Domestically.
and like that's why you don't see like AOC and Bernie aren't out there like rebel. And I see they're not rebelling in the same way. And I also think that they've kind of become smarter politicians. Like Ryan Grimm has a great book about the Squad that was like honestly really helpful for me to learn more about them. And just like AOC went from like doing a sit-in outside of Nancy Pelosi's office to like just being able to be an effective politician within the Democratic caucus. And you know what? That's actually like much smarter politically, and you don't hear that much about like sort of her shenanigans anymore because she's just learned to be a better political player and to work within the system. And I think that, like, as much as we talk about political outsiders, like, if I have a bunch of videos saying, like, actually, political experience matters, man. You know, so like, if it's someone like I'm sorry, I don't like Jill Stein personally, but let's say like we had let's say Cornel West. Cornel West is, I think Cornel West is a good faith actor, right? Cornel West knows nothing about passing legislation and nothing about foreign policy. And like, even if like, not saying that I agree with Cornel West on anything, but even if I did, I don't know if I would trust like if I was president, I wouldn't know what to do. I don't think I'd be a good president, even if I think I have like the right ideas. I don't have relationships within Congress to like work with things. But I don't know. It's just kind of it's kind of preposterous, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Oh gosh, I totally agree with particularly the statements on how like progressive Joe Biden has been able to be. And we talked about this in our first one, and I talked about it in a comment, how like because he's a white man, he can just say super progressive things that Kamala Harris cannot even sniff at. Like he has so many like great answers regarding like transgender rhetoric that Kamala Harris has had to kind of sidestep and be like, well, there's a video of her that people were criticizing her because she said it should be like up to doctors, which isn't, you know, something I necessarily agree with, but it's different than Joe Biden being asked how many genders are there and he being like, well, at least 3. So, oh gosh, yeah. And I think the Biden presidency being so progressive is a response to the Clinton loss in 2016, you know, because if Sanders ended up winning that presidency, first of all, that'd be, you know, crazy 8 years of progressive, you know, not necessarily policy, but rhetoric that would be instilled into the citizens of the United States. And oh gosh, so I think it's not exciting, but part of the reason I think this election is really important is because I think in the face of a loss, Democrats will really have to start pandering to the center. So I feel like it'll be, you know, instead of in 2028, it'll be somebody far less progressive than the AOC types. It'll be like Josh Shapiro, who, you know, for all that he is, you know, some people say he's like a Jewish Obama, and he's a really great speaker, and he might have, you know, really solidified Pennsylvania for Kamala in this race. But like, you know, he's really weird about certain things. Like he's like pro school choice, which is just, to me, that's so odd as like a Democrat to be pro school choice or like voucher funding, etc. in the year 2024, which, you know, that'd be what the Democrats I think would pivot to if Harris loses. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think like something I wanted to touch on with you talking about Biden with like trans issues in particular is that I think like Joe Biden's number one political skill is just being able to know where the center of the country is. Right? Like I feel like if you, I know it gets memed, but that video of him where he's talking about like the perspective of the kid being like, "Mom, I'm transgender." You know, like that. Like it's a funny clip to like get out of context. But if you think about that on like a human level, like that's a sentiment that most Americans are gonna get. Because like I don't think most Americans hate trans people, and that's why like Republicans have to sort of like go out of their way to be like, oh, they're trying to do it to your kids, and your kid's gonna go to
Yeah.
school, and he's gonna come back as a girl, and like you know, I think that it's like during even like during BLM, like people were like there's this story about Biden wanted to quote Thomas Jefferson, and his staff was like, "Oh no, but he was a slave owner, and people are like really against that right now." And Biden was like, "Dog, that's Thomas Jefferson." Like, I'm gonna quote Thomas Jefferson. It's like he had the sort of common sense to not go too far. You know, like I do genuinely think that was a important skill that he got from like 40 years of politics, and I think it's interesting though to see that his ultimate political downfall kind of came from himself, you know, from not being able to feel how unpopular he actually was when he sort of was able to have that sense about everything else. And it's funny. I don't know if there's a Ettinger Mentum on Twitter is a good account, and he I think he called Biden a loser that lost his whole life, and when he finally won something, he was too old to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, that kind of hurt. But
Yeah, he's had a hard life that I think, you know, a lot of Americans can honestly can really relate to, you know, just being that establishment like guy, you know, who's gone through like a lot. I mean, I always feel so sad whenever like I think about like he's had to bury like 2 of his children, and that's just like that's really terrible. But I think it's really all those things have really humanized him, and you know, he's, you know, all the like saying Jack. Just a very American guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I just have 2 more small questions. Okay.
Okay. No worries.
So the first one is so outside of people like Mr. Beat and JJ McCullough, who, you know, are great, what news media do you like largely consume? Earlier, I think you said that you listen to Ezra Klein. Do you like listen to Ezra Klein like consistently, or just like whenever he has a fun guest on?
I've listened to a lot of Ezra Klein. I think that he's a pretty good, like, middle of the road liberal to listen to. Like, I think he has pretty mainstream takes. I think that he's a great interviewer, and he's great for just the sheer amount of people that he brings on. Like I love the different conversations he had. Like I mentioned, he just had Vivek on. I think that episode came out today. Like that was fantastic, and I think he was really helpful, especially on like Israel Palestine stuff. I think like he brought an array of like different people on, and I was able to get like a bunch of new perspectives from him. I get it's not necessarily news, but the realignment podcast with Marshall Kozlov is incredible. Okay. That's the like Marshall was so instrumental to this channel, and he's always bringing on like authors. He's always recommending books. He has like a great knowledge of the presidency. He's like a sort of center right, maybe like through center voice right now. That he's a little more, he's more hawkish on foreign policy, but he like he has such a great perspective on the presidency. He brings on like incredible guests. He like so many of the books that I have behind me were recommended by him. I interviewed him actually. He's like the first person I ever interviewed. So he's awesome. I watched a lot of Breaking Points. I don't agree with their coverage all the time, but I do think that they speak to like a particular sort of strain of politics. It's kind of popular among the majority, I guess. Like I feel like their politics are kind of like normie adjacent and can kind of speak a little more to like what regular Americans might be feeling. And yeah, like those are probably like three big ones that I would recommend. But I try to like read articles here and there.
Okay.
Like New York Times is good, you know.
Yeah. So you're a rap fan. So I think in your
Yes.
video you talked about some Kanye lyrics. Do you have a favorite Kanye album?
Oh, man, that's like asking me to pick my kids. Kanye was like my favorite artist of all time.
Mhm.
Oh, Jesus. Damn, dude. My favorite Kanye album could change every day.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm gonna go. I'll say College Dropout right now.
Okay. Well, that's honestly that's a really great pick. So.
Yeah, I like just like the hunger of young Kanye, the
Mhm.
scrappiness. I like the sort of like I think he put all of his lived experiences up to this point on that album. I think just like knowing all the context behind it, watching Genius, like you just get that energy there. Like from like All Falls Down, I think is like one of the most beautiful songs ever written, and I think it
Mhm.
speaks to like something that you just didn't really see in popular rap music before then. And I think that like Kanye revolutionized the medium, and I think it's completely tragic the direction that he's gone on because
Yeah.
dude, like I was on the Kanye train like as long as I could possibly be, and then I was just like,
Yeah.
no, there's no way. Like it hurt me so much, like personally, like it made me so personally sad, like all those comments that he made, and to just
Mhm.
because the thing about Kanye is like you can separate the person from the art, but with Kanye, that art is so like central to him. Like he is the main character, man. It's him. That's
I
I
think
don't
it
know.
always had some odd takes, but like I feel like it was all a little defendable until we got to what was it 2022, and he was hanging out with Candace Owens, and then he went on Alex Jones. Like, yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying about that, like breaking. Well, you didn't say breaking your heart. That's what I'll say because I just like, man. Oh gosh, like I had always looked up to him because he is really a genius, and I mean not certainly not politically, but when it comes to making music.
Have you?
Gosh.
Did you see the rap lyrics video or the Kanye video because I have a whole Kanye video.
Oh gosh, I know I've seen the rap lyrics video. I might have seen the Kanye video, but it's been too long. I watched it passively and not.
No, it's okay. It's because I think I said that like, oh, Kanye broke my heart, like in that video.
Okay, well, there you go. Oh,
all right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hosting. This was so fun.
Yeah. No, I had a great time. It was awesome, like getting to talk to everybody, getting to know everybody, getting to put like names to faces that I've seen in the chat before.
Yeah.
Was awesome. So I guess we could go ahead and close out now. So thank you for coming. And I guess that will be a wrap in general. I see Will Faccaroni is in the queue, but I don't think you have your microphone or your camera on, and I gotta wrap up. So maybe next time, buddy. Sorry about that. We've been going for 3 hours now. I think this is my longest stream ever. Thank you so much for everyone who joined. Thank you so much to everyone who liked and subscribed on the channel and everything. I really appreciate it. New videos coming soon. More streams coming soon. I'll try to stream on election night. And I'll see you guys later. Thank you guys for coming.